And now this is recording. And now we can talk about beer.
Beer.
Okay. Welcome to the bonus episode. You already know who we are. Today we're going to talk about beer.
Proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy.
Thank you, Benjamin Franklin, noted slave owner, unfortunately. But he said sorry, so, it comes out in the wash, I guess.
Was he actually? I thought he was one of the only founding fathers who didn't.
Nope. John Adams never did, though. But where's John Adams' goddamn statue? I asked you.
God.
Oh, this is vile.
Okay.
I'm drinking.
Liam's just opened a Four Loko.
Oh, bud. Oh, boy.
I am on a tall boy of American Budweiser.
Here's the thing. I like Four Loko. I made the mistake of ordering the Four Loko hard seltzer with a hint of black cherry.
Oh,
the issue is not Four Loko.
No.
I like Four Loko. Roz can attest to this.
Liam's a big Four Loko fan.
Single-handedly keeping the heir to the Loco fortune in business.
So there were four Locos at one point.
I did hear
that
they
all came together to create a brand that we all now know and love.
Science has discovered the possibility of a fifth Loco.
Earth, wind, air, and fire. Ages ago, the Four Locos lived in harmony.
It's called Four. They're owned by a company called Fusion Products, because actually I did a lot of research on this a few years ago. And they're also the people, I think, that owned Not Your Father's Root Beer. Except that if you go to Fusion Projects, the people who make Four Loko, the Google scraper returns just another WordPress site.
Wow. Okay.
Honestly. And they make something called Basic Hard Seltzer, which makes me it's just called Basic.
I love to consume products designed and marketed by people who have a WordPress site. I love to do that.
I trust them a lot more than I trust other people.
Well, you trust them a lot more than you trust Budweiser, who have the $20 trillion a year marketing budget to make fizzy piss water.
Exactly.
I tell you one thing, I trust Fusion products a lot more than I trust fission products. I don't want to put those in me.
Well, you won't get much of a chance to.
The Guyana IPA.
Oh my God!
We'll get there. We will get to Port Tate City, baby.
Oh God. It's beautiful. I love my the specific, the mineral profile of water with cesium 137 in it.
Feel the taste explosion.
Yeah.
Man, so welcome to There's Your Problem, the podcast where I have to get up and pee every 10 minutes because beer does that to me.
Yeah, this is going to be unfortunate. This one will have a lot more bathroom breaks than usual, I think. All right, because it is about beer. And today we're going to talk about how beer is made. We're going to talk about the history of beer up to the present day, and we're going to talk about what the fuck is a pastry stout. I don't want any Mad Elf. Mad Elf is bad.
It's not a pastry
Stop trying
stout.
to tell me this shit.
It's a strong Belgian.
No, they're different, but they're both represent bad things.
Yeah, well, I mean, Mad Elf is bad just because they're just here, we're going to toss a bunch of cherries and a bunch of Christmas spices in this fucking thing, and an otherwise stellar brewery in Hershey, Pennsylvania, are just going to absolutely ruin your life 1 month out of the year. And every single fucking person who knows you're, quote, into beer is going to be like, have you tried Mad Elf? Have you tried Golden Monkey? Listen, I fucking love Victory, but just they need to stop making Golden Monkey, man. I had one yesterday, and I just got through it.
At least you have a brewery that's good 11 months out of the year. The craft breweries up here, basically the largest by far is Brewdog.
Oh,
which operates its own pubs and shit. And the point of Brewdog is that it's a quote unquote punk brand. So when they did their IPO, the tagline that they used was equity for punks. That's how punk they are. And the beer tastes like shit. My God. It's dog shit beer.
No, Brewdog is actually not good. I've had a lot of Brewdog beers because it's craft beer, Europe. I guess I have to drink this.
Yeah, get a selection box of it, and it's terrible.
they're not good beers. Yeah, they're just not that good. Anyway,
This reminds me a lot of Canadian beers, all of which are bad, basically, except for the big boys. Ricketts
Like
Red,
Molson?
great beer.
Ricketts Red is a good beer. I like that beer a lot.
Everything else made in Canada, dog shit.
I suppose we should move this along at least a little bit, even though it's the bonus episode. We don't care how long it takes.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, where does beer come from?
God.
Yes.
Yes, it's true. And God created the earth and created barley,
Yeah.
right? Two varieties of barley. We got 2-row barley here. You can see it has 2 rows. And then 6-row barley here. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, and then 3 more rows behind there you can't see, right?
Yep.
So beer is an alcoholic drink which is usually made from barley.
Wait, shit, there's
Malted
alcohol
barley.
in this? Fuck.
Yeah.
No.
Malted barley, hops, water, and yeast. So today's process, usually step 1, you harvest the barley, which you see here. 2-row is what we usually use for beer, except in the United States, we use 6-row because you can get a little more out of it.
Just to be cheap and perverse.
Well, yeah, because our brewing is highly industrialized to the point where we can use this garbage crap that everyone else can't. We'll get into that in a bit.
USA.
All right, so you harvest the barley, right? And then call back to the last episode. Our next job is to malt the barley, right?
I remember that warehouse. It's almost like it was the first skyscraper or something.
Yeah, exactly. I got a nicer picture of it because yours was too depressing.
Shut the fuck up.
This is a place where beer happens. It should be happy. So, all right. So you harvest the barley, right? And what you do is you soak it in water and you let the individual little barleys in there sprout, right? And right after that, what you do is you dump them on a big floor in what's called a maltings, right? And you let it dry out. That stops the sprouting, right? Usually you apply heat to make this happen, and there's different ways you can apply the heat and different amounts of heat that alters the color, right? So you might get like a darker or lighter malt depending on what you want out of the flavor profile, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have if you're making like a stout or something, you not only dry this, you like roast it until it's black, right?
Huh.
But if it's a Pilsner, you leave it pretty light. And we'll get into how these specific proportions work later as we talk about how beer technology developed. Then you go into step 3, which is the mash.
Ooh.
All right. Yeah, exactly.
Looks appetizing.
Oh,
Yes.
God. It's disgusting. It makes a horrible smell, too.
Yeah.
I used to homebrew. I mean, I still could homebrew. I just haven't done it in a while. Yeah, I never liked the smell of the mash. I thought it was pretty bad. It smells about as good as it looks.
Yeah, putting out like a homebrew WTY IPA.
Oh, it'd be fun. I mean, it'd probably just,
good old Chestnut Street Pale Ale, baby. / Chestnut Street Runoff, depending on what day it is.
Oh, God.
Yeah, you can really taste the HF tank in the background.
I was back at the college apartment where we had one closet you could stick the beer and let it ferment, and it would just come out to inexplicably high alcohol content.
Delightful.
Good times.
Justin, I hope you never go to jail, but if you do, I feel like you'll do very well there.
All right, guys, kids, we're going to learn about tournament wine.
Yeah. All right, so step 3 is the mash, right? Okay, so you grind that malt that you made in the previous step. That splits the hulls of the individual little barleys there. That releases the sugars out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you soak that malt at a specific temperature for a specific for a specific period of time, or more frequently, at several temperatures for several specific periods of time. And that converts the complex sugars in the malt into simpler and more fermentable sugars, right?
Yeah. You make the beer dumber.
Yeah, you make it dumber. So the yeast can work on it. They're single celled. They don't have much of a brain in them, right? You have different enzymes that work at different temperatures. So you might like bring it to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, wait 20 minutes, then bring it up to like 122 degrees Fahrenheit, wait 20 minutes, then 153, wait 20 minutes, something like that. You know, sometimes homebrewers can get away with leaving it at 153 for an hour, but you know, it's irritating and confusing. After that, you drain this barrel. That's called lautering, right? You separate the liquid from the grain. And that can be a pain in the ass because sometimes these block up the pipe. Right?
Gross.
You recirculate it through there to make sure all the sugar comes out. That's drained into something called the lauter tun. Then you put regular water through there to rinse the rest of the sugar out. And that's also drained into the lauter tun. And that's called, the resulting liquid is called the wort.
Yeah. Love to have a wort.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather than an A.
Beautiful, beautiful names in beer making.
Yeah. Just this is a problem with like a thing that was developed by Anglo-Saxons and like Germans, is that you end up with things like, oh, we call this a tun with like a TUN because that's like an old English name for a barrel, or we call this a wort. It's like, yeah, it's cool. And
they call the water liquor.
Huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
In chocolate making, they call one of the steps chocolate liqueur, and it's not. It's so goddamn disappointing.
All right, so now you boil the wort, right? You boil it for usually about an hour, right? It sanitizes the wort, that makes sure that nothing infects it, and this is where the hops go in. That's this guy here. You throw the hops at the beginning, that adds bitterness. You throw the hops at the end, that adds flavor and aroma, right?
And you can have unhopped beers too, right? You can skip this and still make a beer out of it, right?
Oh, yeah, you can, but you shouldn't because it's stupid.
Well, like, I kind of come the other way on this, isn't that, like, I would rather have a weird unhopped beer than the kind of thing that a lot of craft breweries put out, where, like, this isn't a wine episode, but, like, once you notice that, like, in a lot of wines, they use oak barrels and just, like, the taste of oak to disguise all of the fuck-ups, the same time you realize that in cheap beer, they'll just, like, cover shit with hops, and you'll just get, like, it's like eating hops.
But you need a certain amount of hops in there because it's a preservative. That's the primary function of hops.
Oh, that's a Coors Light.
They put hops in Coors Light. They put hops in everything. Everything's got hops.
Well, but they say no preservatives.
Oh, yeah. Well, when they say no preservatives, they're lying. There's two of them. There's alcohol and hops. That's like two of the main ingredients in beer is preservatives. So yeah, at the end of the boil, you put the wort in a big like whirlpool doohickey, right? That separates the solids from the liquids. You run that through a heat exchanger, the liquid at least, and that's fed into the fermenter. That's this guy here. Right, so you feed the wort in a fermenter. The brewer then pitches the yeast, right? So yeast is a single-celled fungus. And what it does is it eats sugar and poops alcohol.
And we're very grateful to it.
I feel that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So over the course of 1 or 2 weeks, the yeast ferments the wort into beer. Then it drowns to death in its own poop, thus ending fermentation. Right?
It goes full Elvis, yeah.
Really going the extra mile to try and make beer sound unappetizing.
So there's lots of factors that affect the final properties of the beer. There's different strains of yeast. There's different fermentation temperatures. There's how long you ferment it, right? So, you have a warm fermentation that tends to produce like a sweeter, fruitier beer, which we call an ale. And a cold fermentation produces a drier beer, which we call a lager, right? Different strains of yeast work differently at different temperatures. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on here. It's complicated.
And you got to have like a lot of working knowledge of like, you've got to be able to like pipe stuff into other stuff. You've got to be able to keep stuff airtight. You've got to be able to like regulate temperatures and pressures.
Yes.
There's a lot of science that goes into this, which leads me to a question, which is how the fuck do you do this shit if you like don't know how to read?
Oh, we're going to get into that in a couple slides though. There's actually like a lot of ancient knowledge which was lost and rediscovered. But next step is
this being it.
Yeah.
We lost the ancient knowledge of how to have the mountain on the can turn blue when it's cold.
We will return to civilization's glory. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, embrace tradition.
Step 7 is conditioning, right? So you have a newly fermented beer usually isn't that good to drink. Sometimes it is, but that's like a couple of weird beers, right? And conditioning prepares the beer for drinking. So a lot of times the beer just fermented, it's cloudy, it's got particles in it, it looks pretty bad. So there's ways you condition it, like there's secondary fermentation, where you take the beer off of the yeast that's accumulated in the bottom of the fermenter, right? Because a lot of yeast dies, it settles out to the bottom. And that can produce off flavors, so you bring it to a second tank and you let it go through secondary fermentation, where the yeast that were smart enough to stay alive eat all the residual sugars, and then they die.
Yeah, you're just breeding smarter yeast that way. That way lies planet of the yeast. I prefer the
what you're doing is you're preventing them from eating dead yeast, because when yeast eat other yeast, it produces bad flavors.
I prefer the thing that gets you a lager, where you lager it, where you store it in just let it age for a bit.
Yes. And lagering is a form of secondary fermentation, but it's cold, right? Lagering's always cold, which is why I put the Coors advertisement on here. It says cold lagered. No shit.
Yeah, and a lager is just German for storing. You can just use it to mean like a camp or a store or a warehouse. I think they used to use mine shafts for this because it's cold and it's dark. You can just stick a bunch of barrels in there and you can just come get them in a while.
Yeah, I mean, you just shove stuff in a cave and forget about it. So, there's other stuff like you can barrel age beer if you want things to taste like oak and bourbon. You can cask condition it if you're a nerd and you like
trying to min-max your beer.
You want some delicious warm flat beer. Cask condition that shit. I love cask conditioned beer. That's when you just, rather than taking it out and carbonating it later, what you do is you sort of seal it in the cask before it's finished fermenting, and then it naturally carbonates, right? You might have additional steps in a modern industrial brewery, like filtering. You might leave it in something called a bright tank for a while that lets everything settle out naturally. There's bottling, canning, kegging from there on. And then you get on to step 8, which is you get drunk.
That's right.
Yes.
And then step 9, podcast.
Yes. Well, sometimes step 8 and step 9 happen simultaneously. So, all right. Well, how did we get here?
The forbidden ancient knowledge you speak of.
The forbidden ancient knowledge we spoke of, we should talk about, right? So beer's been around for a very, very, very long time. There's evidence of beer or beer-like substances as far back as 5000 BC in Iran. And in China, there seems to have been some non-barley beers, which were brewed as far back as 7000 BC.
Huh.
Right?
I really like the dudes like Crazy Straw.
Oh, yeah. Well, they didn't have the technology to make regular straws back then.
I like the idea of having unfortunately, what I imagine as a slave just be like, your straw, sir, as you're sitting on a deeply uncomfortable chair drinking beer from a jug. That is...
that was the highlight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for nothing, Christianity.
This was the best life you could aspire to, is an entirely shaved bald guy holds up your beer straw while your wife just sits there with a cone of waxy perfume melting down her hair.
So a lot of historians ask, did beer or bread come first? And I'm going to say it was probably simultaneous, because a lot of early beer, rather than having malted barley, right, it was usually brewed from a half-baked coarse bread, right?
You have leftover bread that you can't do anything with. You kind of just leave it.
Yeah, you leave it there, and it's it turns into beer over time, right? And then beer it's mentioned in early literature. It's in the Epic of Gilgamesh. It was typically brewed by women for most of antiquity. It was brewing was women's work, right?
Just I love the idea that the Epic of Gilgamesh just has Gilgamesh doing like a couple of big cans of dark fruits, just like crushing some fucking.
I believe it mentions specifically that Enkidu downed 7 pitchers of beer.
That fucking rules.
Incredible.
So this is one of the only occupations where women could be, independent back in the day. But a lot of early beer had a problem, which is that it sucked. Right? Wasn't very good.
Like fucked up bread smoothies. Tastes like Huel.
Sort of thick, just more like a gruel than a beer. Lots of solids in there. It went very bad. It went bad very quickly unless you brewed it to a very high alcohol content. And brewers had no way of measuring alcohol content.
Other than getting Enkidu to drink 7 pitchers of it and seeing how hard he falls down.
I was about to say, yeah. They didn't have hops. If it was flavored at all, it was done using a mixture of fruits and herbs that is called Groot.
Okay.
So now in China, beer died out pretty quickly, despite the fact they figured out how to do it. That was replaced with rice wine. But in the West, beer stayed around. And that is because
we're dumb. Because we're just like, we persist in doing the dumb thing. While in China, they're like, yeah, we can do this, but why would we want to? It sucks.
All right, we're too busy inventing movable type 900 years ahead of you.
Yeah, I just took a sip of delightful rice wine and invented the mortar 900 years before anyone else will.
Yeah, and it's like, nah, I'm trying to mash this bread into alcohol.
Yeah, just this kind of bread crushing.
All right, fellas, let's time to mash this bread.
Damn, had to grind for this view, but it's just like with a millstone.
Yeah, exactly. But, all right, so the ancient Egyptians managed to refine the process of brewing beer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they managed to invent both malting barley and mashing sort of as we know it today. Right. And a lot of evidence, at least if you believe brewers, says that they were actually making some pretty good beers. So you couldn't like serve it in a glass vessel or anything like we'd have now. It was usually you had a big, dumb jar like this right here. Right.
Got to drink the whole thing
and you drink out of it with a big straw. Usually it was like a communal thing. Mm-hmm. Everyone was drinking out of the same beer.
That's how you get coronavirus.
They probably developed herd immunity. No, there's alcohol in there that kills the coronavirus, I assume.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So the reason why we know that it's probably not bad is that we can like take yeast scrapings out of some of these pots and bowls. And you can get live yeast off of these because yeast is insanely resilient. And you can just make beer with this.
Oh, yeah. The Dogfish Head as a whole. Yep.
Yeah, there's like that. But also, like, the other thing is we've learned something about their technique since then, right? So I mentioned before how you need to hold the mash at certain temperatures in order to get the best beer, in order to make sure the enzymes convert right temperatures, right?
Mm-hmm.
The ancient Egyptians figured this out.
Aliens.
Right?
Aliens.
So they use a method we would call, what we would now call a decoction, right? To get the right temperatures. And a decoction is when you have a certain amount of water at a known temperature and a certain amount of water at another known temperature, and you mix them in proportion in order to get the temperature you want, right? So in that case, it was like normal room temperature water and stuff that was boiling. You could mix them together. You get the mash at roughly the temperature you wanted. And, once they figured out the sweet spot, they just kept doing that over and over and over again, right? Because at the very least, you can get boiling water and you can get room temperature water.
Yeah, and you can just do kind of like trial and error stuff. And you get like a consistent-ish product out of it. That's cool.
Yeah, and this was all fermented. They didn't know what fermentation was or how it worked. they didn't really know what yeast was. So it was all fermented with wild yeast in the various ceramic containers they used.
You just like, as far as they're concerned, you leave it there, and then like a guy with a bird head makes it into delicious beer.
Yes. Now, the thing is, like, the Egyptians are very good at beer, but by the time of the Romans, beer was sort of like the second-class drink, right? You know, it's relegated to provinces. It's a barbarian drink, right? Everyone drank wine, right?
Yeah, because that's elitists. Prestigious, and you you have to import it from Italy or Libya. Grapes are finicky and more expensive.
Yeah, they're elitists like Riley. Yeah,
yeah, that's right.
So the other thing is, of course, wine kept better because it had more alcohol in it in general, right? And Romans called beer cervezi, right? And that's from the Celtic word for beer. Right.
Huh. And they say we have no influence on Western civilization, but where else would you get a deprecatory Roman word for piss water?
Exactly. No, because it derived from Celtic. That's why white people like to say cerveza so much. So eventually, the empire of wine nerds, the Roman Empire, fell. And we entered the Middle Ages, which means we need to talk about ale and the alt beer.
Need to talk about Germans.
The Germans.
The Germans.
Let's go to Germany. Oh my God. All right. So Germanic tribes, they're brewing beer before and after the Roman Empire. There's this old Nordic folk myth called the Kalevala. I don't know how to pronounce it. Some Finnish bullshit, right? Which I understand was like mostly written down in the 1800s. So, you know, who knows how accurate it is. It had like 200 verses on the creation of the world, but 400 verses on making beer.
Well, like creating the world is much simpler. You make the like earth, you make the sea, you make the air, make some birds. Yeah. Easy. Beer, you've got to like regulate temperatures and shit. Fuck that.
I had to actually think about that one. Yeah. I mean, so a lot of Germanic tribes had managed to adapt, you know, the process of mashing under Roman rule. And, you know, that sort of produced decent beer. There were a couple of actual like Roman, like industrialized breweries out there, like not too many, but they existed.
I love to crack open like a Rome brow.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a Peronis.
Now with 50% less lead.
The can was made of lead foil. So around 736, hops are first cultivated in Hallertau, which is in Bavaria. But there's no real mention of them being used in beer until 1079.
What the hell do you use them for otherwise? You can't eat them. I mean...
pass.
Yeah, fuck. what the fuck do you use a hop for? That's not. I'm gonna find this out.
That is ornamental. They look nice. I think they look nice. I used to grow them in my backyard before they took my backyard from me.
Yeah, before you lost the ability to grill.
Yeah,
it genuinely does not fucking say. Fuck, man.
By the 13th century in Germany, hops start to displace Groot in the beer, right?
Good.
Because they were taxing Groot, but they weren't taxing hops.
Right? Classic tax evasion shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
That rules.
Fuck the government.
Well, just a different thing over here.
Yeah, but like between this and like the Whiskey Rebellion, I'm just thinking about how much anti-government activism has involved not wanting to pay tax on the thing that gets you drunk.
Why should I have to?
They say the government doesn't drive innovation. So, all right. So at this point, you know, 13th century brewing's mostly a home affair. There's not a lot of large brewing operations, but that changed pretty quickly, right?
Do you have monks brewing beer at this point? Because that's like the old version of craft beer. Is like a monastery will just start doing beer, and it produces enough that it can sell the excess.
Oh yeah, I mean monasteries did all kinds of early like industrial stuff, right? You know, anything from like ironworking to like, you know, making steel to brewing beer to like any of this crap, tanning, you know, stuff like that. Nasty stuff like tanning. No one wants to deal with that. I guess the monks would. You know, there's a couple large monastery breweries in the 1100s and 1000s. They really get off the ground in the 1300s. A lot of nobles get in on the act, right? And since they aren't as rigorous as monks, they don't keep as good records. They decide to fuck around.
Oh boy.
And they make a lot of shitty beer.
Did they find out?
Yes, they did find out.
I love to drink Lord Elouin de Musc's Hyperbrow. It just kills me stone dead instantly.
Yes. Not a lot of repeat customers, actually. That's a problem. And that sort of stuff led to the Reinheitsgebot, right? In 1516. It's the German beer purity law, right? Which said beer can only be made with water, hops, and barley.
Yep.
Later they added yeast.
Is this the first food hygiene law that we know of?
Basically, yeah. I mean, certainly the one of the last ones in effect. The Reinheitsgebot was still German law until like the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, you still get beers that like will advertise that they are adherent to it. After all,
as they should.
Yes, yeah, it's a good law. It just says don't piss in the beer. Don't put don't put any fruits in there. Don't fuck around and like make a it's chocolate flavor. No, fuck off.
Don't put like a bunch of hot dogs in the beer. Yeah.
No, you goddamn animals. Just put the beer is constructed of 4 parts. These are they. Anything else is deeply haram.
I believe the German for haram is verboten. So one of the things is, even after this was passed, Bavaria still had a bunch of problems with shitty beer, right? But it seemed to be seasonal. So brewing in the summer was outlawed altogether in Bavaria in 1553.
No fun. No fun on your summer vacation.
You can't. No, you have to take a vacation now.
That's very German.
You can't brew.
You have to go and play Brewing Simulator, which exists on an abacus.
So this was a major split in Northern German and Southern German brewing culture, and we'll return to the Bavarians in a bit. But first I need to get another beer. I'll be right back.
That's right. Yeah. So we're mulling the difference between my 2 types of comical German accent. There's a very Norse German, who was wie wichtig the beer to the 4 ingredients. And this is a very South German Bavarian Austrian type of wine. I put the whimsy in the beer. I built the fairy tale castles and I bankrupt the kingdom of Bavaria.
Yes. That's how I always laugh at the different German automakers, because I think they have such a wackadoodle sense of humor. Mercedes-Benz just being like, what if we put a 507 horsepower engine in a minivan? Who's going to stop us?
Yeah.
Who's going to tell me no?
Yeah, who is going to drive up to Stuttgart and tell me not to do that? Although actually, like, the weirdest corporate like company town in Germany is Wolfsburg, where VW is. There's a fucking chill off of that place, man. If you drive into town in like any other brand of car than a VW, it's just like, it feels like high noon. Somebody's gonna key your car. It's messed up.
I like the idea, because of course all cars are made by like whatever the same 6 companies now. The idea of driving in there it like a Bugatti and having to explain desperately as they're pulling you out of your car.
No, it's owned by VW.
It's German now. Just fucking AA flag and shit like that.
Yeah. I mean, the North German, South German cultural divide is not something that we're going to solve on a drunken podcast episode. But I know which side my wart is buttered on, right? And it's I don't very much enjoy the kind of the fairy tale castle beer, and the kind of like Oktoberfest kitsch of that. Yeah. And like, these ladies with the big boobies and the dreidels. They have to handle the tray of 50 beers, which we will all drink together, and then we will go to our extremely well subsidized hospital for alcohol poisoning. Not a fan.
Did we get to Oktoberfest already?
Well, I was talking about, I was doing my German accents.
Such as it was.
Yes, such as it was.
All right. So, I am now pouring myself a beer, and then we shall continue.
Let's get a can check. What kind of beer?
I have a Yards IPA. It's in a bottle because I'm sophisticated.
That's you, buddy. Yes. Don't work my way through this goddamn Four Loko.
This I have the unending Budweiser.
I am in agony. Again.
This is nothing. I am drinking nothing.
Aren't they supposed to call it Bud over there?
No. This is it's still Budweiser.
All right, you're out from the under the boot of the European Union finally.
Here in little England.
I don't think that like the Czech Budweiser was successful in getting the American Budweiser to not call themselves Budweiser.
Something libel laws.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So the split in Northern German and Southern German brewing. Okay. Mm-hmm. So in Northern Germany, they have cooler summers and they brewed beer year round, right?
Yeah. We build the timber-framed houses.
Hey, timber frames.
Yes.
And we form the Hanseatic League.
Yes.
Where we have the three cities of trade. And we export things, and we have a gigantic compound in London with its own legal system. And we create this parallel economy.
Yes. All those things happened. And also because they have free trade, because they all have the Hanseatic League up there, rather than monasteries dominating the market, they had private brewers who, could get some big operations going. Right?
Yeah, you can form a society to do something, which is what a corporation ultimately is. You call this a Hansa, thus a league of Hansas is a Hanseatic League. It's also where Lufthansa comes from. It's a flight society.
Oh, fuck off.
No, seriously.
That's not my argument, Alice.
It's better than a Luftwaffe.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, sure. Still insane to me that they still have one of those, by the way. Like they don't have they have a Bundeswehr, right? They have a Bundesmarine, but they still just fucking have a Luftwaffe. To me, I don't like that at all.
What does Waffe mean?
Weapon?
Yes, weapon. It would be like honestly, probably the closest translation would just be Air Force, right? Like it's an Air Force.
Yeah, or like air weapon. This is our air weapon. This is our water weapon.
I do like all of them that are like, this is actually an air army. It's just like, all right.
Like France, like Armée de l'Air.
Yeah, the Army Air Corps, yeah.
I also love the Chinese just sticking on People's Liberation in front of everything.
I love the People's Liberation Army Navy. You can't tell me that that's not a chain of surplus stores.
Let's go to the People's Liberation Army Navy game.
Oh my god, I was about to make that joke.
Fuck you.
Do you think that like a naval aviator in China is part of the People's Liberation Army Navy Air Force?
I'm just imagining one guy tackling himself.
Good tackle out there. Bullshit. Throw a flag. No. Just running back and forth. He's got to cover each timeline too. He's got to be his own hold me back coach.
Go Army Navy. Beat Army Navy.
So there's a couple of material conditions here we should talk about, right? Okay.
Yep.
Why brewers got privatized in Hanseatic cities pretty quick, like, right? So when most people are brewing at home. So Hanseatic cities, like, they all have pretty distinctive architecture, right?
Mm-hmm. Timber frames, pointy
frames,
roofs.
Yeah, and you got like these nice narrow houses, they got timber frames. This one down here, this is Bergen in Norway, which has some of the last old wooden ones. Hey, I have a little tchotchke of this on my desk, actually.
That's cute.
Yeah. So tall houses on narrow lots, which are made of wood. And, lots of Hanseatic cities caught fire, right?
Yeah. Occupational hazards.
So eventually what they did is they banned home brewing as well as baking. Well as basically cooking in general in your own home.
No fun. Yeah, there is no fun to be had here in the Hanseatic League.
You will not cook. No cooking in the city, in the burger.
Yeah. You have to go to the cooking house.
Go 5 miles out of town to this grill you've stashed into the Black Forest.
Someone buys a hot plate and someone crashes into the apartment. 99999.
I can't tell you. I cannot express how much I love the concept of like a Hanseatic League SWAT team. Just a bunch of dudes in like jerkins and like Morian helmets kicking a door in and like abseiling down.
What they did is they relocated brewing and cooking operations to large commercial or large communal kitchens, right?
Mm-hmm. Primitive accumulation, baby.
Yeah. So these communal kitchens is supposed to be like everyone, in your neighborhood or in your group of houses or whatever, you go cook there as opposed to cooking in your apartment, right? Okay, so this is the one thing. Anytime anyone who's like, when someone's like mentions on the Twitter, like, communal kitchens and socialism sounds like a great idea. No, communal kitchens suck. They're really bad. Because always, like, I don't know, fucking Steve down the hall is like leaving all his dishes out and he's not going to do them. And like he uses like, some of the extra, like communal kitchens are bad. Everyone hates them because they,
even the Soviets realized this.
Yeah, you have to deal with your neighbor's shitty cooking.
Yeah, exactly. There's always going to be a guy who cooks fish in the morning or something. Jens of 34B is making lutefisk again. Yeah, I'm skipping a meal. Yeah, please this is my Carl. Do not touch. Even in the utopian visions of Soviet apartment blocks, they very quickly switched into no, everybody has to have an individual kitchen per unit because otherwise everyone is going to murder each other.
Absolutely, yeah. So people got sick of using these communal kitchens pretty quickly, but because there was like a practical purpose for not having everyone burn down their house every day, rather than get rid of the commercial kitchens, a lot of them were turned into like cafeteria type operations. And, they hired folks to cook and brew beer for them. And
you accidentally invent the restaurant.
Yes.
Congratulations, Germany.
You sort of invent the commercial brewery.
Yeah, the two go hand in hand.
A lot of Hanseatic cities, again, they traded freely with each other, but a lot of them still had protectionist laws about beer, right? They wouldn't let imported beer in, so they could only export to one place, and that was the lawless hellscape that was London.
That's right. Yeah. You just have this like fucking literally you have a Hanseatic compound which much like the city of London is entirely independent. It's not part of England. It is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Hanseatic League, subject to like German laws. People speak German in it. It's very much on the same model as like colonial possessions in Asia later on, and you export your shit that you want to sell, which in this case is beer.
Yeah, so that's what they did. They exported a lot of this beer to London for to get some extra cash. And so the English, even back then, they're a little bit particular about their ale, right? So this imported German swill wasn't considered to them, at least to the folks who could write, to be worthy of the term ale. So instead, they called it beer, right?
Distinct naming practices. I do like at this point though that England is still like enough of a backwater that these rich Germans who are like actually important in Europe are like, yeah, man, we can just fucking dump this shit on these idiots, and inadvertently lay the foundations for a superpower like a few hundred years later.
Look, it turns out being the consumer of last resort is an advantageous position.
Yeah, so it turns out.
USA. So, real English ale had no adulterants such as hops.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we fucking like our piss water the way it is. Thank you.
Beer was looked down upon as a crude and unhealthy drink. There's a man named Andrew Boord. He wrote in 1557 that beer was only suitable for a Dutchman.
I do genuinely love the 16th century in England because it was a period where we just decided that anything that was bad was Dutch, just in nature. Just like
I have any sort of compatriot, whatever, with the English. My brothers in arms, the English, together to hate the goddamn Dutch.
Yeah, we just like we lose a few ships to like sea dogs and we just like and sea beggars, and we just decide everything that's bad is Dutch now.
I like that. That's basically how I live my life. I hate I hate a bunch of stuff, obviously, but sometimes I'm just like, what Western European nation can I find to kick around here? Like, surely this is the Danes' fault.
All right, now the thing is, the advantages of beer with hops over ale without hops were pretty quickly undeniable, right? Hops prevented spoilage, which meant the beer lasted longer. Hops prevented bacteria formation, and that made it easier to brew a weaker and therefore cheaper beer, as opposed to, brewing with enough alcohol to kill the bacteria that way, right?
And I mean, bear in mind, most of this beer you're not drinking to get drunk. I mean, that may be a happy accident, but like for the most part, it's a thing that you're drinking like a soda now. You're drinking it because the water will kill you, and you want something that tastes nice.
That was certainly the case in London. In a lot of smaller towns, you usually did actually have somewhat reliable access to clean water. Cleanish water.
Well, this is what I get for time and again my London-centric view.
You could actually not get cholera from the water in a lot of places that weren't London.
Huh?
Yeah. This is going to become important in a few minutes. Beer with hops also tasted better, right? Your hop-free ales were cloyingly sweet, because there's nothing to balance out that maltiness, right?
Embrace tradition, reject modernity, bring back the cloyingly sweet ale.
So your English brewers really quickly took to beer, and it began to supplant ale by the 17th century. The terms slowly became synonymous, right?
Just kind of interchangeable.
Yeah, ale didn't really regain like a distinct appearance for a long time, or a distinct definition. Another thing was that beer could travel better than ale, again because it lasted longer, and suddenly beers from all over England became available in London, right? And one of the most popular was called the Burton Pale Ale, right?
Huh. So from Burton-on-Trent. Huh?
Yes.
Which is a very nice little market town in Staffordshire, in the Midlands.
It still has a couple big breweries there to this day.
Mm-hmm. Good water, apparently.
Yes.
From this, you get a good beer, and you can ship it that's what got to be a couple of 100 miles easily.
Yeah, but at that point, since it's a relatively heavily hopped beer, and it can be, and that means you can, if it takes a couple weeks to ship it, doesn't matter.
Deal, as opposed to spoiling damn near instantly, which I think is funny that's what we've looped all the way around to, is these ultra hopped beers that are just like, well, if you don't basically drink it from the fermentation tank, you're already too late.
Oh my god. Yeah, your hazy bullshit pale ale, which of course is what I had right before I had what I'm having right now. But we'll get to that. Now, one of the things is that the Burton Pale Ale, they had very good water up there for making pale ales. In London, they did not.
Oh, really?
No.
So
I love my cholera ale.
Yes.
As it turns out, when you piss and shit in the water, sometimes bad things happen to you.
Where else am I supposed to piss and shit?
Out of a window.
So,
out of a window.
If I shit in the river, the water carries it away. It's convenient.
Yes, it's true.
Genius.
London brewers couldn't compete with Burton, so they Burton on Trent. So they invented a new kind of beer. And that was called the Porter.
I have had a decent amount of London Porter in my time, and it sucks dick. It's terrible.
Well, one of the things about London Porter is that there is no consistent strain of London Porter that existed from back then to now. We don't actually know exactly what it was like at the time, right?
One of those lost arts.
Yes.
The kind of porter that you get now is like dark and bitter, and it tastes like burned food.
Delicious. I'm craving one.
not a fan. It tastes like eating old tires.
I've had a couple good porters in the United States, but also we have a refined brewing culture over here. I like the Port City Porter.
Oh,
that's
that
really good.
one.
It's also brewed to a traditional strength. It's about 7.5% ABV.
There are some good ones.
Yeah.
Like I will point out that like the riband on that bottle of London Porter says rich, dark, and complex.
Yeah.
Complex is one of those things that people use as like marketing when they don't want to say it tastes bad. So like it's a complex flavor. It's not a bad flavor. It doesn't taste like tires and like burned meat. It's complex. And if you don't like it, you're a Philistine.
I used to pick up every once in a while an English porter at one of the local beer stores. I forget which. I think it might have been Local 44. It was called Old Engine Oil.
Yes.
I love that beer. It was great. I loved it.
You and I have very different. I like a light sweet beer, and you apparently like a fucking mazout ass fuel oil.
Yes, they're good.
It was a good beer. I haven't had any since that one time Liam and I went to that bar in DC, and they were selling this beer for like $6 for like a tiny pour.
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass to get.
This is un-American.
I do
right
remember
here,
back when Mad Max.
I guess it was an imported beer, but
un-British.
When Mad Max RIP was still open in West Philly, there was one time where the taps on the one side broke, like just that whole side, and so the poor bartender, I think it was like her second week on the job, was just like, "Oh, you can't have that." And I was like, "Do you have any stouts?" She's like, "Oh yeah, I have Old Rasputin." Which is like a 9.5% stout. And she didn't know how to price it. So she kept pricing it at $4. And I drank, I drank like 8 of them. And I remember closing my closing my tab, and she knocked off a couple of them because she felt so bad. I was like, "Thank you for my $24 tab. Here's your $50 tip. I could barely fucking walk."
Yes. Here's all of the money in my wallet. Here's my bank card.
Liam and the bartender at Mad Mix. It's your first TNG reference of the night. All right. So the porter, right? Okay. This is some complex history here, which is deeply intertwined with the Industrial Revolution, right? And this starts with how did English brewers brew before, typically, right? We talked about the mash before. We talked how you run the water through multiple times, right? Traditionally, English brewers brewed 3 beers per mash, right? So the wort they drew off the first, that was drawn off into 1 ton. That was called the first runnings. They made a strong beer out of that. They ran through some water a second time. That was the second runnings. That made a medium strength beer. And then there was the third runnings that made a weak beer, right? And sometimes small beer, yes. So, which
is mostly water, you like, but enough alcohol to kill all of the cholera in there.
Yeah, it usually came out around 3-4%. So someone in the late 17th or early 18th century had the bright idea to combine all those batches into one beer, right? And they called that the entire, right?
Yeah, a dude called Harwood, apparently, in about 1730. And I get this from the letter of an extremely well-named clerk called Obadiah Poundage.
Nice.
Well, one of the things is this is not so certain as some historians think it is, at least according to the sources I looked at, where it's like a lot of people seem to be extremely confident that this is what happened, but it may not have been what happened.
Are you doubting the word of Obadiah Poundage, a man who sounds like an 18th century porn star?
Oh my God. But that's like mostly in terms of like nomenclature, I guess, is how the name entire came about. We don't know exactly, but that's the theory. The other theory is that there were like 3 kinds of beer on tap at every pub, and the entire was a way to merge them all together. But like
just give me a third and a third and a third.
There were a huge amount of, there was a bunch of disagreement as to what those 3 kinds of beers were. So, but the thing about brewing the entire from the first, second, and third runnings is that this is a cheap beer to brew, which could be sold for strong beer prices, right? And it could be brewed fairly quickly, which meant it was ideal for scaling up production, right? And it became very popular with London's working class very quickly, which is how the name porter came to supplant entire, right?
And you just have this locally produced product that you can sell for still cheaper than like Burton Pale Ale.
Oh yeah, Burton becomes like the upper class product pretty quickly, but the porter's where the money is, right? So during the Enlightenment and early Industrial Revolution, things start to get a little wacky, right?
Oh, good.
So, monks had been perfecting beer brewing for over 600 years, but everything they had done was trial and error. In 1750 and 1760, actually, I think a little earlier than 1750, like 1725, came 2 radical inventions, right? Those are the thermometer and the hydrometer. Hydrometer
you don't have to do guesswork anymore.
This guy pictured here, right?
Is that what the kids are calling it?
So,
yeah, this dipstick.
Yes. So hydrometer's a neutrally buoyant stick, right? It's neutrally buoyant with water at this level right here, where you can see there's a 1.0000, right? And it floats at different levels relative to how dense the liquid it is floating in is, right? So that means you can reliably calculate the amount of sugars you extract from the mash and then the alcohol content of the finished beer.
You can get a consistent product. You can start regulating it, all of that good shit that makes the modern world.
Yes, exactly. So I can know that, like, if I start out with an original gravity, that's the gravity before fermentation, of 1.07, that would be right about here, and it ferments to, say, 1.010, that's up here, I have I can't do the math offhand. I think that would be around 5-6% alcohol. Actually, probably higher than that. Probably 6 to 7.
But like, even if you're guessing and even if you're wrong, that's still more information than you've ever had making beer ever before.
Yes. And this information became vital in the cutthroat world of porter brewing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's because the public's demand was insatiable, and the Industrial Revolution would provide new and unthinkable ways to scale up production to unheard of heights. Right?
Yeah, and you start exporting porter, like you get Russian porter, which you export to Russia because Russians like it. You get stout, which is just like a strong porter.
Yes,
like that's what a stout is. It just means a strong porter.
Yeah, because stout just meant strong. Yeah, which is bizarre. Which considering what it became with Guinness, but we'll talk about that in a bit.
4.7% bullshit.
So there were a couple of other innovations as well as the hydrometer and the thermometer, which let people brew at high quantities, right? As well as high quality, high quantities. So number one was the invention of really big tanks.
Yes. That's how we won the war.
Yes.
Mechanized infantry.
Other kind of tank.
Yeah. So this is actually a picture of a fermentation tank at the Maker's Mark distillery.
Hey. Sponsor us.
But a large porter tank would be similar to this, right? So really big tanks were important because they allowed porter to be brewed reliably year round, because the more volume you have in the tank, the harder it is for the temperature of the beer to change, right?
Yeah, it insulates, right?
Yeah, the beer insulates itself. Because these were essentially built like really large barrels. You can see here, basically like barrel staves. These are metal rods. In this case, I'm not sure how they were built. There's no pictures that I could find of old porter tanks, which is again why I used the Maker's Mark distillery. But some of these,
we're thinking this, but larger, like taller.
Not just taller, larger around. Some of them were 22 feet in diameter. Some of them held 20,000 barrels or more of porter. Right?
Jesus.
Yeah, they were big ass things. I believe one brewer held a banquet for 200 people in one of their porter tanks.
God damn.
Imagine the smell.
I wonder if they had used it yet by that point, you know? So this lets us scale up from like breweries that make a couple thousand barrels a year to breweries that make 500, 600,000 barrels of beer a year, right? But there were some problems with really big tanks. The big one being the London beer flood of 1814.
Can see the way that this is going already.
Yeah, so the London beer flood was when the Horseshoe Brewery, which was right near the modern Tottenham Court Road tube station, it had one of the largest porter tanks in existence. It started leaking, and leaking was apparently normal and tolerated. But this time it leaked too much and it burst open and it flooded a residential neighborhood, killed 8 people.
It's fine. I'll drink my way out.
Well, that's what the press said. They said, it was an Irish working class neighborhood. And the press was like, well, they all, drank themselves to death trying to drink their way out of their apartments and shit. And I was like, it's like real gross shit. I mean,
classic English shit. Yeah.
So another innovation, in addition to really big tanks, and after the London beer flood, they actually switched back to smaller tanks. So they're like, I don't want to lose that much product. I don't care.
We flew too close to the sun.
I don't care about the Irish. I don't want to lose that much product.
You don't want to lose that much product to the Irish.
Oh, God. Another innovation was the invention of patent malt. I just realized there's a watermark here.
Oh, yeah. It says brew and grow, huh?
Well, I got this from a online malt dealer, so it's free advertising.
Well, there's your malt.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so thanks to the invention of the hydrometer, brewers could now measure what we call brew house efficiency, right? And that's the amount of sugar you extract from a given amount of malt, right? So porter brewers had been using something called brown malt before, which we don't know exactly how it was made or what it was. This is entirely lost
nobody
knowledge.
cared.
Yeah,
exactly. Nobody cared enough to write it down.
Brown malt was the cheap stuff, right? While the Burton Pale Ale brewers used pale malt, which was much more expensive, right? So after the invention of the hydrometer, the porter brewers discovered, to their shock, that the cheap brown malt that they were using did not yield as much sugar per pound, British pound sterling, as the pale malt brewers of Burton were getting. So they realized, oh wow, this has been a false economy the whole time. We need to switch to pale malt. But pale malt couldn't brew a dark enough beer to disguise the disgusting flavor of London water. So and pale malt had only recently become possible because of the invention of coking coal, right? Coking coal is coal that's been baked, essentially, which lets it, really do a smokeless flame. It's mostly used in steel production, but it's also, useful for if you don't want to impart a smoky flavor into the beer you're brewing, right? And it lets you control the flame and control the malting process. So if you brewed with pale malt, you couldn't disguise the flavor of disgusting London water. You couldn't get the right flavors either. You couldn't get the right color, of course. So the brewers tried a few things to start out with to make these beers cheaper, right? They started adulterating the beer with all kinds of stuff, right? So molasses, brown sugar, licorice. Okay, whatever, right? And they also tried ferrous sulfate, Cocculus indicus, which is a kind of poisonous berry, sulfuric acid.
Like all of these better than the molasses and the licorice.
Opium.
Yeah, you've made a pastry stout. Congratulations.
Strychnine. None of it really worked that well.
Well, I mean, no complaints, right?
Oh, yeah, you're probably not getting too many complaints from the strychnine folks, but probably you are from their families. I mean, assuming they don't all live in the flop house, in which case no one cares. Do they not have workhouses? No, so none of this worked well, and it sort of reduced the public's opinion of porter, which is going to be important in a bit. But a guy named Daniel Wheeler had an idea. Rather than using brown malt for the whole beer, what if you deeply roasted some of the malt to a very dark color and then add it to the pale malt, right? So he came up with what was called patent malt, which is what you're seeing here. You can see it's a much darker color than the malt we've looked at earlier. Wheeler's patent malt came out in 1817, and you could use a very small amount of this in addition to pale malt. And that's like less than 3% of the mash bill, right? And you could come up with something which tasted the same as a regular porter in both taste and color, right?
So it's like fucking around with like sugar-free sodas now, where you just have like a 20-year period where it's absolute horseshit, and then you get like something that's kind of okay at the end of it.
Yeah. And this is still how we brew beer today. Almost every beer is brewed primarily with pale malt, and then there are additional malts you add, just to alter the color and flavor, as opposed to using one kind of malt that does the whole thing. And this was so quickly supplanted brown malt that we don't know what it is anymore.
Again, nobody cared enough to write any of this down or do any math about it.
Yeah, we have no idea. We don't know what a porter brown malt is. We don't know what a porter from the early 1800s looks like. We have no idea.
Just other than it may contain opium. So you might have a nice, weird time.
A lot of people theorize that a porter from the early 1800s was actually lighter in color than a modern porter. Because because they were having a hard time. I mean, it would be relatively easy to make a dark black beer. They were trying to get a certain, I think it may have been more of a dark amber, maybe a red color, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
A different beer than what we had now. The other thing, of course, is at this time, everyone's usually drinking out of a sort of pewter drinking vessel, right? As opposed to a nice clear glass thing like we have today. And that was for reasons. And those reasons will become important as we continue going, because I realize, oh wow, we're less than halfway through. How's everyone doing? Okay.
I'm doing okay, but I am going to go and get a second beer.
Power moves only.
I'll get some backup beers too.
I'm just going to keep drinking this goddamn Four Loko.
So you have the best efficiency because you haven't had to get another beer.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm going to have to eventually or die or vomit or shit myself or whatever, but... All right, so there's 2 muffins sitting in an oven. And one of them turns to the other one. And he says, Jesus Christ, Frank, it's getting pretty hot in here, isn't it? And the other muffin turns to him and screams, oh my God, a talking muffin. I believe I have told on this podcast before.
Bazinga!
just going through my drops. I don't have a lot of beer related ones. I do have Stephen A. Smith talking about cum though.
I've been coming. I'm going to continue to come. Skip's been coming. He's going to continue to come. And people just need to get over that.
Fantastic.
I always really liked what's the difference between a hippo and a zippo?
What's the difference?
One is really heavy and the other is a little lighter.
I like that.
Thank you.
I just...
So there's another innovation that the Victorians gave us, which continues to plague Britain to this day. And,
oh God!
and
okay,
that is the Tide pub.
Look at all this humanity. Took me a second to remember that it was Shaun of the Dead and not just like what everything looks like with coronavirus now.
Just a normal day in Shropshire.
yeah.
We'll go to it's got heavy doors. You know, yeah.
So a pub, if you're not familiar, a pub is it's short for a public house.
Yes.
The idea was that like back when you just brewed beer at home, you could just open your home and like sell the beer that you had, and people could just like come in and chill and drink the beer. And pubs come in 2 kinds. There's a tied house and there's a free house. The tied house that Justin is talking about is where the pub signs a contract with the brewery, or these days more often like some multinational that owns a bunch of breweries. And that means that they only sell the beers from that one supplier.
Yeah. And this started out with the porter brewers in London back in the early 1800s. You're fabulously wealthy from brewing porter. The absurd progress of technology has rendered porter prices stagnant. How do you increase your market share without doing actual work, right? Because doing work is bad. You shouldn't do that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you start buying the pubs and you tell them to only serve your beer, or you lend to publicans. Publican is a person who runs a pub, as I understand.
Yes, often called a landlord on this basis, because you would be this tenant of a brewery.
Yeah. You lend them money to start their pub on the condition they only serve your beer, right? Mm-hmm. So by the early 1800s, almost half of the pubs in London were tied. And at this point, beer consumption as a whole was actually shrinking in Britain.
Because people are getting into gin, which is like a whole, we'll get into the spirits episode, but like the gist of it is that gin is very cheap. Once again, the perfidious Dutch rear their ugly head with their Genever, which they can just sell you the cheap booze. You get much drunker much more quickly, and it becomes this kind of like this sort of cultural discourse. Hogarth does these engravings, Gin Lane and Beer Street, where he contrasts the lassitude of getting drunk off of this perfidious Dutch spirit, where you like throw your baby down a flight of stairs because all they did was melodrama. And the like fat, happy, yeoman drinking good English. The fact that it's German is now long since in the distance.
Yeah.
Good English beer. That makes you hale and hearty, as opposed to gin, which like turns you into one of these zombies we see here.
Yeah, I was about to say, I could tell you, I'm mostly a beer drinker, and I am extremely fat, hale, and hearty. So, I think
I'm not sure.
I've never tossed a baby down the stairs.
That we know of.
Yeah, I'm not sure that drinking gin makes you like rail thin, particularly either. But the thing is that the people were drinking gin, but like beer, like you could get a pint of gin.
Oh, God.
It's like my pint of
yeah, exactly.
Yes.
you would just be drinking. You would be drinking from like gin shops, which were also crucially, and here's your Marxist analysis, not tied to syndicates of production in the way that pubs were, and so this was also very dangerous because just anybody could open up a gin shop, and that made them disreputable. But you were still using all the same weights and measures. You would still be drinking out of these same pewter fucking pint cups, just full of gin. And getting fucking ripped to the tits.
That is bad. But the thing is, once we had all these tied pubs, right, there's no way to increase your market share. Yeah, I just noticed all these row houses back here, they look extremely Philly.
That's Georgian architecture for you.
They got the nice porch out there. You got 2 windows per row house. Anyway, so
that's not going to be a porch though. That's like a bay window.
Oh, I thought it was a porch. Damn.
Yeah, no, that'll be like fully enclosed, with like a window on each side.
Ah, you fucking nerds. You don't have a porch.
Yeah, I know.
How are you gonna sit out there and judge your neighbors? Come on.
Well, you might have on these. You may have. I don't think these do, but you may have like a tiny strip of front garden. But it's not the same.
All right. So if most of the pubs are tied, how do you expand your market share as a porter brewer? Especially when people are drinking less porter, they're drinking more gin. Especially in London. The answer was buy up your competition, tie their pubs to your brews, and shut down their brewery.
Love a monopoly.
Yeah, so there's lots of consolidation that happens. And this, even as like the market itself cannibalizing, right? There's lots of unhealthy stuff going on in the porter market. And the tied house was a problem for a very, very long time. And we'll talk about how some of the tied houses were liberated, but like they still exist.
Yeah. I mean, there were some legal changes to try to like make like them be able to like have guest beers.
Yeah, the guest beer is like mandatory now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're not fully tied to a single brewery, but you do still have these same relationships, kind of.
And I finished out the notes on this slide by saying I've never been to a Weatherspoons.
Weatherspoons and O'Neill's and things like this are like the logical end where you, as well as a monopoly, you have a monopsony, which is where you have a single buyer rather than a single seller. And that's like shutting down the whole supply chain start to finish because you just have chain pubs.
Oh, yeah.
And now instead of like an individual pub landlord who may be like effectively an employee of a brewery, what you now have is like typically Weatherspoons too will like buy up a lot of like properties that have been abandoned. Like cinemas are a good one because nobody like goes to the cinema anymore. So they'll buy up all of these very architecturally interesting places, gut the inside and turn it into another pub. And you just kind of, you own, you now have like salaried employees and you have a separate supply chain as opposed to just having like an individual free house or whatever.
Do you know there's a whole like Irish pub company, multinational, that just designs Irish pubs?
Literally just called the Irish Pub.
It's just called the Irish Pub Company, yeah.
Well, this is why you can go to any city in the world. You can go to fucking Pyongyang, I think, and you would just say, "Oh, so this is patio Doyle's," and it's like a bicycle up in the wall. No, aren't we whimsical? It's like, no, come on, dude. This is so.
This is my favorite thing as whatever Irish diaspora in the United States is the fact that like I was in Istanbul 2 years ago, and there was a pub that we stumbled upon called U2 Irish. It's a U2 Irish pub. At
least to do the pandering enough to have an O'Doulahan.
Was the size of my living room. The guy spoke basically no English, and he kept just playing the wolf tones at increasingly loud and alarming rates.
Well, you found an unusually authentic Irish pub then.
He was fantastic. And if you ever find yourself in Istanbul, hopefully you don't get shot, highly recommend going to YouTube Istanbul Irish Pub, where you could get drunk for whatever the equivalent of like $9 was. It was fantastic. And I will die on the hill.
4.2 stars on Google, by the way.
Great fucking place. I hope they have a Twitter. I hope we all follow them on Twitter. I will die on the hill of liking Irish bars in just very perplexing places. That's my favorite.
Oh man, it's fucking tiny.
Literally
this
the size of my living room. They didn't have a bathroom in the bar, so they had to share with like the neighbors upstairs. And when I say neighbors, I mean like residences of this apartment building. That was magnificent.
Yeah. Check out Shahid Mukhtar, Bekar Street number 21 in Taksim, if you're curious.
Yeah. So, shout out to our Turkish fans who I assume had major issues with our with Joe Kasabian.
We can expand the like extended commercial universe of Well, There's Your Problem to Megatronics and the U2 Istanbul Irish
These
pub.
are the two endorsements we'll do. Can't wait to do a live read. Not for like Purple or Casper or MeUndies, but just for Megatronics.
Look, if you want to buy a BB gun and a car stereo in the same place, there isn't anywhere better to do that. And a samurai sword. Yeah.
All right. So lots of consolidation in the brewing industry. The porter industry is sort of self-cannibalizing. They're also adulterating their beer. This lowers their reputation, which leads to the eventual dominance of the pale ale industry. All right.
Huge mistake. Stick to lager.
We haven't even gotten to lager yet, Alice.
Oh, I know. Lager is still developing on the continent. This is like all pig English dog shit ideas.
And we're literally not even halfway. So just buckle up, Alice. Yeah.
No, we are more than halfway. As of this slide, we're now at 17 to 32. So, one of the problems of putting strychnine in beer and causing deadly beer floods is lowers your reputation at brewery and the style of beer as a whole. So, and with a better understanding of water chemistry in the 1800s, it was suddenly possible to brew a passable pale ale with disgusting London water. And yeah, so the pale ale and the India pale ale developed almost simultaneously, right? Along with what we now call the Imperial Russian Stout, as Alice mentioned earlier. And then I'm a little bit confused as to the origin of the Baltic Porter. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I think it's the same thing as the Russian Stout, where you just you export it to the Baltic.
Well, the modern definition of a Baltic Porter involves fermenting a strong porter with lager yeast. That's the thing. But I don't know if I don't know how that developed. If it's like something we retroactively applied or not, I have no idea.
Is this?
I don't know.
So these are all English beers, and apart from the pale ale, they were designed for export. So we're going to talk about colonialism.
Oh, I have an answer. Baltic Porter is like a case of trying to reverse engineer porter. So like we export stout and we export porter to Russia, and all of these guys are in and around the Baltic Sea are like, this is pretty good. I wonder if we could make this and sell it cheaper. And they kind of can, but like in the process of reverse engineering it, that's what they add to it.
That would make sense, yeah, because they definitely would have very cold fermentation temperatures.
Yeah. And so you end up with a bunch of Polish dudes being like, yes, is authentic English porter. And it's like, yeah,
yep,
okay, cool.
Yep. All right. So brewers in Burton-upon-Trent started brewing pale ales in the late 1700s, as we mentioned. A lot of them were for shipment to London because it was a big market. Burton ales were characterized by Burton's water, which accentuated the hop flavor. They were also much more highly hopped than even some modern India pale ales, right? They used a lot more hops. I don't know if the hops were strong back then is the other thing. Like they probably had different varieties. The only hop variety that survives from this era is a hop variety called Fuggles.
Excuse me?
Fuggles, yes.
It's real, goddamn right.
I used
Fuggles.
At the last apartment, I grew them in my backyard.
Yeah, Alice.
I still have some in the freezer, actually.
I'll have to freeze my Fuggles.
What a set.
Yeah, I freeze the fuck out of my Fuggles.
Please stop. You know what? I no longer enjoy this.
So some of them were also brewed for export, right? So a lot of dark beers were exported to Russia initially. That's how you get your Imperial Russian Stout. But after Napoleon blockaded the Baltic Sea,
continental system, baby.
They were like, all right, we got to ship beer to India.
Yeah, fuck you. Go the long way.
Another fine hit in like the great like compilation of the British Empire's fuck it, we'll just give it to India, which is why we get Indian tea. It's like using India as this kind of like dumping ground for various failed ideas.
Think of it as a developmental test bed.
Yeah, exactly. India was the British Empire's skunk works.
Consumer or last resort, USA.
Yeah, just as we were shipping all of this ale to India, we were just like, man, I hope this doesn't create a superpower in a couple of hundred years.
A superpower that was it India and Pakistan, or was it China and Pakistan that like 2 weeks ago decided to just fight each other at Kashmir with a bunch of fucking sticks and shit? Like,
listen,
you have guns. Use the guns. Like, whatever the specific politics of Kashmir aside, like, you have a fucking gun, you have some rocket launchers and shit. I don't care if you start an avalanche, which I imagine is why you're not, going all John Wooey up there. But like, even so, man.
Like all of the narratives of like fighting in Kashmir are basically just like, yeah, this dude just climbed up like 3,000 feet of rope and beat a guy to death with a climbing axe. You could not pay me enough to like join either the Indian or Pakistani army.
How would you like to sweat your dick off at 19,000 feet? There's nothing here. It's a glacier.
Yeah. Very, very nice water though. I bet they could make fantastic beer out of it.
Sick for your Instagram.
I just hope Kerala brings us to fully animated 5-foot gauge Indian communism worldwide.
Yeah.
So why do they ship to India, right? This seems a little further than Russia. Well, one of the things about shipping stuff to India is that most of the trading in India, the idea is you bring stuff back from India and you make a lot of money doing that. And then like going over, it's like, well, we may as well run an empty ship. We'll still run a profit. But if you want to stick some stuff on, sure. So it's very cheap to ship stuff to India.
It's like dead weight.
Yeah, exactly. It's like basically ballast. So we're like, all right, well, let's develop a pale ale for export to India. That's going to have more hops. It's going to have more alcohol. But
doesn't go bad.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't go bad as quickly, at least. So the thing is, these India pale ales developed for export, they become very popular in the domestic market almost immediately. I
regret this immediately.
Not a lot of India pale ale ever went to India.
English people cannot be trusted. Our taste buds are wrong. There is something wrong with us. Do not no. This is why every fucking craft brewery decides it needs an IPA.
You need like 5 IPAs to do it right.
Sells, baby.
Yeah, they taste good. I'm drinking one right now.
The ruination.
No, I don't like them. I like a wheat beer sometimes. I like a lager. Why don't I just go and chew on one of those frozen hops then? If that's the taste sensation that I want.
Oh God, I thought someone actually had marketed that as a product by now.
Soda, basically.
Like
frozen hop on a stick.
I mean, I'm sure someone would have that at this point. Like they would just have like a
because they're assholes.
Hop soda is disgusting, absolutely gross. You need the alcohol to balance out the hops. That's why this flavor profile works. Okay.
Do not like a hop taste. Don't like it. Not racist, just don't like them.
Maybe you should have a higher alcohol IPA.
Maybe you should cry about it.
Go have some Double Dog. That's always a good idea.
All we have is Brewdog.
Oh, God. All right. Come to America. I'll introduce you to some really good IPAs that will knock you on your ass.
Fine. Jesus. Okay.
All right. So anyway, so these India Pale Ales become very popular domestically almost immediately by the 1860s as brewers discovered that pale malt made more sense to brew with, as porter fell out of favor because it was full of strychnine. England transformed from a porter drinking society to a pale ale drinking society, right? The porter slowly dies out. Very few porters survived, and those that did generally survived under different names. For example,
it's very interesting. There's this class kind of thing where a porter will survive only in like the region. So you can have like a brown ale, which is like popular in the north, or you can have a stout like Guinness, which is Irish. But like you go back to replicating Burton-on-Trent again because you have this like prestige pale ale.
Yeah, and like Guinness's extra stout today started from Guinness's extra stout porter. They just shortened it because it was like, well, we can't talk about porter anymore. It might have strychnine in it.
And again, they're like the kind of the ales that were descended from porter, like typically get called things like bitter. And the class connotations of that are very much like a working class drink. It's looked down upon. It's seen as provincial. It's seen as especially northern. And so it like you have this dichotomy between bitters and stouts and pale ales until lager finally makes it over to England in like the 90s, like the 1990s.
Was it really that late?
It really was that like literally it like when Carling and Carlsberg and all of these other European lager makers started selling in large volumes for the first time, it created this kind of like this moral panic about like lager lads and stuff.
Well, I mean, Carling is Canadian.
No, it's not.
It's from this. Carling's Canadian.
Haven't we been over this? And it's not.
From this.
That's just one of the. Okay.
No, Carling is. It's from this city called London. In Ontario.
Oh, you're right, and I'm an asshole.
That's how you get your big bag of cans with the lads.
Yeah, you get your big bag of cans. It's all brewed, and I think it's brewed in Holland.
I'm pretty sure the Carling Brewery is actually in.
I was getting confused with Carlsberg. Carling is also brewed in South Africa, I think.
But yeah, no, lager coming to Britain is a very, very late thing, actually.
I didn't realize how long it took. But we can discuss this further in a couple slides. All right, so through the 1800s, brewers continue to experiment with ways to increase their brew house efficiency. How much sugar can you extract from the barley, right? And reduce their ingredient costs. So in 1847, refined sugar was allowed in beer for the first time. I remember reading somewhere a while back, I don't recall where, so this is apocryphal, but that the Guinness Brewery experimented with running, you do like first, second, third runnings through the wort, right? through the mash. Guinness experimented with doing several more runnings afterward and then concentrating that wort by running it through the steam engines of the brewery.
Huh. Doing some fucking like distilling of your beer.
Yeah, but distilling it prior to fermentation.
Strange.
As I understand it, it did not work very well.
Yeah, you don't say.
I mean, it definitely concentrated the wort, but it was not good for the steam engines. So in 1880, there was a movement by brewers to liberate the mash tun from being merely barley. It's called the Free Mash Tun movement. In 1880, they managed to pass the Free Mash Tun Act, right?
No more pressing rights issues in 1880 than mash tuns.
Yes. And that removed taxes on beer ingredients and instead started to tax beer on its original gravity, right? The amount of sugar in the wort as indicated by the hydrometer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So now your beer could be made of anything, barley, corn, sugar, molasses, strychnine, whatever.
Yeah, but I get my delicious wheat beers again, so I'm happy.
This is true, but a higher alcohol beer was taxed at a higher rate.
Fuckers.
Right?
Hmm.
Just point blank.
Yeah.
Typical nanny
Exactly.
states.
It also effectively banned homebrewing because you had to go and pay taxes on... You had to have someone come around and assess your beer if you brewed it at home. So you'd
Sounds
be
like a
taxed
great
on
deal.
it properly.
Oh, I'm here.
I would simply
yes.
brew beer illegally.
This led to a very gradual decline in the alcohol content of beers in Britain, which continued for more than a century. And of course, other competition was on the horizon, which means we have to go back to
Germany.
Yes.
To go back to Bavaria.
It's a very nice place. You hang out in the Ratskeller. You can go see the Frauenkirch. There's that really highly ornamented church back there. It's all nice and pedestrianized. It's really nice. There's this cool transmission tower back here, which I've never been. I haven't been to that one. I've been to everything else here because
but not the Fernsehturm.
No, I haven't done that. When I go back as like
in 2029, yes.
No, one embarrassing thing is I've never been to Germany when I've been a fan of beer.
What the fuck? It's fine.
I went there several times before prior to being like 19. I've never been to Germany after that, except a few stints at Frankfurt
Your
Airport.
favorite place in the world.
Where you can't get a beer there. You cannot get a beer at Frankfurt Airport. Like it's really
yes. This is not the fun area. This is the flying area only.
This is the Flug area. You will not have beer. You will get on the Flug.
I do enjoy that the German for airplane is just Flugzeug. It's just like flying thing.
That's what it is.
Yeah, it's a flight thing. Although you can also use Zug to mean train, so you could plausibly interpret it as flight train.
I've never seen multiple of them linked together, so I don't believe that for a second.
Auto schwer, Zug gut.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about southern Germany because we left off with them before. So we talked about how the alt beer
schlecht. I said car heavy, train good.
Unser Wagen ist kaputt. All right, so we talked about how the alt beer was exported to England and sort of formed the basis for English ale, right? And the alt beer is called that because it's the old beer. It's brewed in the old style. So let's talk about the new beer, which is brewed in Bavaria, right?
Neubier.
Yes. So they banned brewing in summer in 1553. And over time, the wild yeast that Bavarian brewers used, they collected it from the bottom of the barrel every time, right? And this became a distinct species from the top fermenting yeast of the north. Right?
Yeah, it gets a weird accent.
Yeah.
Bigger tits.
Yes.
Just little yeast molecules wearing a dreidel.
Yes.
Did I say dreidel? Yeah, dirndl.
Jesus, what?
Fuck, I don't know. I don't know, dude.
Pints of beer at the time, or whatever. Liters of beer, excuse me.
Yeah.
And this is how we got the lager, right? So lager is warehouse in German, as Alice mentioned before.
Yep.
Because these,
I've inadvertently preempted this whole slide because lager's the thing I know the most about.
well, lager is very good beer, you know. So, so these beers fermented for a long time. They were stored for a long time. Early Bavarian lagers, and they didn't know they were making lager at the time. They were very dark. They what we call it like a Bavarian Dunkel now. It's a darker beer than what you usually associate with Bavaria right now. And breweries are getting larger, but sort of in the monastic tradition for a long time until 1833. So in 1833, Gabriel Seldmeyer.
Oh boy.
Sedelmeyer, whatever, of the Spaten Brewery, which you may have heard of, and Anton Dreher of the Dreher Brewery in Vienna traveled to England. I heard that.
Nice sound effect there.
I heard that louder in the earphones than I did in real life.
Yeah, we have come to determine what balance of piss you put in the water that you sell to these hogs, these swine.
Yeah, so they rode their Harleys up to England, right, and to study porter breweries, right, because they heard these this industrialized production of beer in Britain, and they see enormous mechanized operations and the refined technical equipment. Of course, they are German. And they immediately are like, yeah, we must have this data.
Yeah, we do the technisches Werk, aber we include less of the piss. Because the people that we sell this to, they are not hogs like you. They will detect the taste of the piss. We remove the piss. We keep this steam and so on and so weiter. And things of that nature.
Yes. All right, so they immediately set about adapting this for use in Bavaria, right? So your first, like, sort of vaguely modern lager beer was introduced at the 1841 Munich Oktoberfest, right? And
I hate Oktoberfest so much, man.
This was something that you would vaguely consider similar to a modern Oktoberfest beer or a Vienna lager, right? Very similar. Now, one of the things is the next year, some folks got wind of this over in the Bohemian city of Pilsen.
Hey.
And they managed to produce what we now call the Pilsner, because Pilsen has exceptionally good water, right?
Yep.
So
also got some nice caves that you can lager stuff in.
Yeah. So they get this operation going, and it scares the pants off the Bavarian brewers, right? Because this is the first non-German beer that has any kind of penetration into the German market, because it's such a good fucking beer. Really good beer. Like, you know, that
nice. The Ausländer have figured out how to make the beer that doesn't taste like piss.
Is your Pilsner it's very highly, it's you know, your nice light Pilsner beer as we think of it today.
Yep.
Your Pilsner Urquell, basically unchanged since back in the day. Very highly hopped. It's got a lot of Saaz hops. And Saaz is the German word for a Czech location.
Oh, well, I mean, so is Pilsen, which is now Plzeň, I think.
Which is in the Luni region. I don't know anything about the Czech Republic.
It is named after the Czech city of Žatec.
All right.
Just doing some Sudeten kind of thing of being like, no, that's
fuck off.
It should all be part of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union should still be around. Anyway.
But yeah, Bohemian Soviet Socialist Republic. Thank you.
Yes. So the Pilsner is a beer is very light in color. It's very highly hopped. Pilsners are very bitter. They're brewed with the impossibly pure water you get in that region, and they're cheap enough to brew at scale that, these Bavarian brewers were like, "Whoa, this is going to be a problem, guys." And it made serious inroads into the German beer market. It was like, oh shit, we need to brew something which is at least as good as this. And Bohemian Pilsner could be brewed year round because they had access to better caves, and also it was legal for them to do so, which the Bavarian brewers could not do. This is where I digress for a second. We need to briefly talk about Belgium.
Oh,
no, I don't want to.
End it now.
Yeah. So Belgium, right? The idea is like in Belgium and France, what you do is they left the beer out in barrels. Well, they left the beer out in gutters outside of the brew house.
Yeah.
Gross.
Right? And then a bird shat in it, and then it would start fermenting.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, exactly. And this leads to incredibly complex flavor profiles and stuff like that, and they're very popular right now. But yeah, that's what happened in Belgium. Anyway, so I never finished the actual end of the Munich Hell slide, did I? Eventually, the Germans invented the Munich Hells, which was able to compete with the Bohemian Pilsner. But even before they did that, like a lot of Germans started immigrating to America, right?
Hell, by the way, just means pale.
Yes,
it doesn't like to say that Helles beer. It's just a pale ale.
No, it's a pale beer. Beer is different from ale. I thought you were English, Alice.
Listen, at least we can agree that whatever we're calling it, it doesn't have pigeon in it.
Yes, doing better than the Belgians all the time. That's all I can hope for.
That's right.
So, meanwhile, in America, everyone was drunk on whiskey literally all the time. I mentioned this in one of the Franklin episodes. In colonial America, there's not a lot of commercial scale brewing. There's certainly home brewing. You had a very few early commercial breweries. One was the Eagle Brewery. That was started in 1829, which we now know as Yuengling. They start by brewing something called the Old Chesterfield Ale. And a porter, actually. The Yuengling porter you can buy at any beer distributor today probably has the most contiguous legacy of any porter on the market right now, even more so than any London porter.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. Because all of those just like converted over to IPAs.
Yeah. So
or stouts.
And you could get the Yuengling and Hershey porter, which tastes like nutsack.
No, Yuengling's been doing like a really bad job as trying to react to it.
Exactly. You don't need to do this, man. You're Yuengling.
Yeah, it's retroactive definition as a craft brewery. Like they're not doing well with it. I mean, if they had just kept the Yuengling Bock, that would have been good.
And now
that was
they have
beer. The Bock was a good beer.
Flight by Yuengling, even though they still have Yuengling Light. Well, Flight is their whatever goddamn 4.2% ABV, 95 calories, tastes like nothing. The advantage being you can drink 9 million of them. There's Yuengling Light and Yuengling Light Lager. They have these fucking people make like 9 beers and 3 of them are the same light beer.
Yeah. Yeah, they've not done. The IPL was also very bad, if I recall correctly.
The IPL. It wasn't great, but like Yuengling Premium is actually my favorite just because I don't even think Yuengling knows they make it sometimes. I feel like
but like the point is that you have all of these fucking Germans come into America and like they make it good by making the same beer that they made in Germany or in Bohemia. But
you also have better communication back and forth is the other thing. And also you're in America. It's even more lawless than London, of course.
Yeah.
So
you can just put whatever in there.
This is when our familiar names show up. So Frederick Edward John Miller forms Miller Brewing in Milwaukee, 1855. You have Eberhard Anheuser, who was a soap manufacturer. He buys a brewery in 1860, and with his son-in-law, Adolphus Busch, forms Anheuser-Busch. It's out in Milwaukee.
Making the kind of beer that they make in Budweis, which is now Budowice, which is very much like a Pilsner. It's very nice. And this is the degenerated version of like a Bohemian lager is what I'm currently drinking, and it's quite nice.
The big boy, I forget wasn't Anheuser-Busch the folks that started using refrigeration rail cars before anybody else did too?
I'm not sure.
That's plausible.
Because that, I believe, is why it got so big, was because they had beaten sort of everybody else to the punch. And there's also, we could talk about steam beer if you want too, which was to make lager without any refrigeration. Anchor kept making. I think they still might be the only people that make it. But that was back after the San Francisco Gold Rush, 1896. So you're starting to get worth talking about. You're starting to get your own specifically American styles. Also, holy shit! One of the Maytag people, Maytag Dairy Farms, people who make the cheese, was the guy who bailed out Anchor in the '60s. There you go. Sorry, everybody.
I mean, you can also I will point out that as part of this accumulation of capital, you then get a few decades later people like August Bush IV, who it has an entire section on his Wikipedia page called Legal Troubles. Yeah. And I don't know, women keep turning up dead around him. It's weird. There's a section entitled Helicopter Incident.
Oh, the Maytag folks were in fact the washing machine people. So the fact that you can enjoy Anchor steam beer is because of the Maytag people. I love that.
Don't we have a Maytag washer?
No, dude. You fucking think our landlord of all people balled out and got us the good one?
Donate to the Patreon.
I would expect he probably would, because he doesn't want to replace them. Maytag washers are good. They're like the last.
Patreon.
They have the last good appliances out there. I don't know. I'll check after the episode.
Anyway. For all their goddamn problems, the family still actually brews the shit.
Yeah. So Adolf Coors forms Coors Brewing, 1873, right? And for a long time, there's a huge number of breweries in every city in America, right? They're all brewing German-derived pale lagers.
But
right?
before we go further, it's worth noting that Native Americans brewed something akin to beer prior to Europeans getting here, which was corn, birch sap, and water. And the first commercial brewery in the United States was built by the Dutch, unfortunately, in the 1630s. So
I assume they only brewed beer suitable for a Dutchman.
So I assume right before packaging, someone both pissed and shit in it, and they dumped off their blackface tar.
They shoved a pigeon.
Tastes
in
like
there.
shoe polish. Yeah.
All right, so it was mostly German-derived tradition, though. There were also a few breweries that brewed some beers in the English tradition. But
yeah, those didn't last.
Some of them did. You can still get a Ballantine IPA to this day. But the largest operations started seeking greater efficiency in their operations, right? That's how we switched to 6-row barley instead of 2-row barley, right? As we mentioned at the start of the episode. And we start adding up to 30% corn to the mash to balance out the excessive protein in the 6-row barley. So you have too much protein in the beer, it starts to get cloudy, right? So you got to balance that out.
Each of these little decisions takes American beers closer and closer to sex in a canoe.
Oh, God. It gets worse, though. But I'm going to use the restroom first, then we'll move on.
So I was reading before we started recording. I was reading the scroll off of this Budweiser can, which says, "We know of no brand produced by any other brewer which costs so much to brew and age." And Justin kind of went off on this on the basis that it is true that Budweiser is tremendously expensive to make. It's just that they use all of that money to make sure that it tastes terrible.
Which is actually it's weird because I what are the arguments to that? Because people are just like, American beer, blah 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 blah. It's funny because to get when you're talking about the batch size that they're making. You have to. That truly is an incredible amount of work to get.
I'm gonna look up some more beer fail sons, by the way, because I'm just thinking about the Coors fail son who ran for governor of Colorado.
All the Millers are I forget the whatever the most prominent Coors. Yeah,
Pete Coors.
Piece of shit.
Pete Coors is a gigantic piece of shit. Yeah.
I assume the Molson family are also horrific jackasses.
Probably yes. Pete Coors lost to Ken Salazar in 2004, but it's just like still funneling money to Jeb Bush at one point. Just a couple of cool guys. No helicopter incident on this Wikipedia page though. Just he did get a DUI though, but like
comes with the territory.
So we talked about the episode we just recorded, how like DUI was a way of life for a long time. So
Oh yeah.
I did throw a couple of images on here, sort of pre-prohibition breweries. Although I'm not actually sure if this one is pre-prohibition. Horseshoe Cove Porter in Altoona, Pennsylvania.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reminds me of a lot of good times playing Train Simulator and getting drunk off my ass.
Mm-hmm. You got your old Georgetown. That's Christian Hurek Brewing Company in Washington, D.C.
Too many fucking Germans.
Yeah. I believe there is DC Brau revived one of their beers, but it didn't last too long.
Yeah, because you were super excited, and then they killed it.
Yeah, I was really excited. I was like, oh shit, this is going to be like one of these old-fashioned macro brews that existed prior to Prohibition. Nope, not going to happen.
Roz, it was old school. Altoona Brewery was open before Prohibition, and actually made it to 1974.
Jesus.
Wow.
So they were taken out by the doldrums.
The kind of shit that you drink yourself to death with after being laid off from the railroad.
Oh, God. Well, you could have moved to Hollidaysburg. It's not that far off. The Penn Central kept the shops open. They just moved them. No, I mean, those shops were highly automated. That was the problem. Once they started automating shit, they didn't need as many people as Altoona could supply. Oh God, that'll be a future episode.
Take a dark turn in the middle of it. Yeah. At a mere slide 20 of 32 on this fucking death march towards me getting alcohol poisoning.
Well, wait for our Penn Central episode. That'll be fun.
18 hours long mini-series.
Almost certainly, yeah. So, okay. So a lot of these brewers became very wealthy. You may have seen some of the fallout from the Anheuser-Busch family in the news recently.
We talked about this a little bit.
Yeah. So this is Ken and Karen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here to shoot the Black Lives Matter protests. Ken is going to get a cartridge in his nipple.
It's not really
if he fires that gun.
The fact that you would pay more fucking money to make your AR look like an M16.
I kind of like that. I kind of like the retro look. Should have gone with the cut down pre-Stanag Vietnam magazine too. Get 10, 20 rounds in there. I think that'd be cool. I like her little crooked arm 380. I really appreciate that.
I'm gonna leg somebody. Yeah. Yes, and then there's gonna be 60 fucking people at your throat, and you're gonna deserve it. And all you did was leg somebody.
I was about to say, if they shot someone, their house definitely would have been burnt down. They would have deserved it. I'm like, so these folks live in a house that was bought by Adolphus Bush himself for his daughter and son-in-law as a gift.
Have you seen the photos of the inside? It's horrifying.
It is a Gilded Age mansion. I can appreciate it on those merits. I'm not going to say I think it's a very pretty house. I think the people who own it are extremely bad.
Yes.
The things that they filled it with, though, like the ornament of the like stuffed peregrine falcon guarding the bread rolls.
I paid attention to the architecture more than I did like the actual like stuff that was in there. So I don't know. I was operating on it.
Oh, you think you're better than us? You think you're better than us?
Oh God, yes, I'm highly trained to appreciate the architecture on a different level.
Yeah, no, you don't enjoy it on as many levels as I do.
Oh God. So, but this was Adolphus Bush's. It was a house he bought for his daughter and son-in-law, and this is the sort of wealth you could have back in the day. Is you could just buy your daughter a palazzo for the hell of it.
It's St. Louis, man. You could still do that.
Well,
well, like people were calling it a McMansion. In fact, I think I did because I wasn't paying attention, and it's not. It's just a regular old mansion.
It's a regular mansion. Yeah, 100% say it's a regular mansion. Now, the other thing is, of course, Adolphus Bush had several other extremely egregious displays of wealth. One of which was his private railroad car.
Nice,
awesome.
So he had a private railroad car which had a beer tap in every room.
Don't pretend like you wouldn't.
No,
I
we're not
would.
arguing that. We're just
One of the weird thing is, if you look this up online, you will see the wrong railroad car. You will see the Adolphus, which was the corporate private railroad car that Anheuser-Busch had for a long time, which is just a regular corporate railroad car. Well, we don't really have those anymore. But his own one was probably something a little older, had a beer tap in every room. That sounds fucking dope as hell. I want to do that. Rich people have
no goddamn imaginations anymore, and that's so fucking disappointing.
Absolutely. Nobody would have, these guys would never have a private train.
Yeah, they're not fun. They will, they need to have a private island where they can do like pedophilia and shit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How would you do pedophilia when you're so drunk that you have a beer tap in every room? How would you do that? You couldn't be done.
You can't do pedophilia when you're drunk because suddenly the moral compass kicks in.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, oh no, wait, this is a kid. Home. Fuck, I can't do that.
You hear that, Ellen Powell? You just go home.
If someone was doing pedophilia near me, I would simply leave.
What are you eating, Alice?
Well, that's the other thing. If it's a private railroad car, you're going like 70 miles an hour. Like, it's very difficult to leave. Oh, you could just walk up further the train, tell the conductor, "Hey, they're doing pedophilia back there."
Just toss the pedophile out of the train at 70 miles an hour.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. I would.
Yeah, just be like, no ticket.
If you know what you're doing, you could probably cut the whole car loose from the back of the train.
Yeah. That'd
be pretty funny.
Of course, the most well-known pedophile has a goddamn airplane, not a train.
Yeah, you can't do anything about the airplane. So we can assume that Adolphus Bush, probably not a pedophile.
Well,
because
unless we do Liam's plan with the surface-to-air missile launchers.
All right, yeah, we started off this episode with Liam threatening to take down every airplane in the world.
To be fair, my parents' house in New York is 3 houses.
Has a surface-air missile launcher,
yes, yeah. Well, as you know, 3 fucking houses down is York Hospital and York Hospital's helipad. So there I was as a teenager, mad at the world, mad at everything, not sleeping particularly well.
Oh boy!
And I fucking thought to myself every night at like 2:45 a.m., what if I just had a Stinger missile? And I would shoot the goddamn helicopter down, and I bet they wouldn't fucking try again. They're already dying. What do they care?
At least they didn't crash the helicopter onto you like Glasgow police did.
What did you say to me, Ross?
I said the pilots are young and healthy, Liam.
Oh, look at me. I'm a fly boy. Not anymore, you're not.
Glasgow cops managed to crash their own helicopter on a pub full of people.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't have helicopters. There's no society has progressed beyond the need for helicopters.
especially in the hands of cops, the people least equipped to deal with them.
Good Lord.
They don't understand what's going on. It's like giving a nuclear weapon to a dog.
I feel like a dog would be more responsible with a nuclear weapon because he wouldn't know how to use it.
Also true.
Oh, God. All right. So then...
How many parts is this episode going to be in? 4 or 5?
No, this is a bonus episode. It's in 1. So then something bad happened.
The Prohibition. Yeah.
Prohibition.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the problems with America was that people got drunk a lot to the point that it was a problem.
Oh, the problems.
It was a problem.
I don't agree.
I mean, I don't agree either, but the thing is there was a popular movement to ban, to restrict or ban
nerds.
the sale of alcohol.
Everybody
fucking
supported
nerds.
Prohibition. That's one of the weird quirks of history. Is like the IWW supported Prohibition. Yes, I'm wearing my IWW
Thank you,
shirt
Alice.
and drinking a beer. So, yeah.
Anytime. I mean, listen, right? Like, we never had prohibition in this country, but what we did have was like a bunch of Christian temperance movements that created things like bars, but like where you could only get milk or like fruit juice.
Oh,
it was so.
Get the Moloko, yeah. And you go do some ultra violence, yeah.
Exactly. Bit of the old in out.
So, the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was passed in 1917, which was designed to prevent the sale or use of intoxicating liquors. Now,
so remember passing amendments?
There's an interesting caveat to that, right? Is that what was the definition of intoxicating liquor? And the people who promoted this amendment had very different ideas of what it was.
Oh, good.
Most people thought intoxicating liquor was hard liquor.
Yes.
Anything which is over a certain ABV by volume,
anything over
like, 100 proof or higher. Congress passed the Volstead Act, which said that an intoxicating liquor was anything with more than 0.5% alcohol.
Sure.
Hand wash ban. Fully Wahhabist.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And this came as a shock to a lot of prohibitionists. They were like, oh, I thought we could still have beer.
Thanks for
No.
nothing.
No, you can't. They thought they were only banning distilled liquor, which, I think all of us have had bad experiences with. Yeah, but, and they also thought they were only banning consumption in public. Is the other thing. I was like, they took it too far.
Time to give the federal government a vast amount of oversight into public life and not check. Yeah.
So this was universally realized this is a bad idea. And somehow this shit lasted until 1933. I have no idea how.
Remember doing amendments?
They realized they needed tax revenue, and they were like, "Oh no, you do whatever you want again."
And then they realized they needed beer.
Yeah, you on the other hand, we did get The Untouchables out of it, and that's a great movie. They send one of yours to the hospital, you send one of theirs to the morgue. That's the Chicago way. That's a good movie. So Prohibition, worth it.
Happy to announce I have finished my Four Loko.
Congrats.
Oh,
how was that for you?
Another beer.
I mean, I have to pause the episode. I've never been on the receiving end of this before.
Nah, just keep going. Usually what happens when you're off is that Liam tells a joke. So, any good jokes?
Well, let me think of a joke. Man walks into a bar. He says, ouch.
I have a Soviet joke.
Okay.
Okay. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Trotsky.
Trotsky who?
Well done, comrade. You've passed my little test.
I wasn't sure whether to get my ice pick out or not, but I don't think I can do that over the podcast.
Sweet gracious God, I am back.
Love to do a 19-hour podcast.
This is my fault.
Listen, we're going to do all of this in Ken Burns' voice. Prohibition was fought in 1,000 places. from Mechanicsville to Tuscaloosa.
My dearest Alice, it has been so long since the touch of beer has tasted my tongue.
I'm weary without your spirit and your 20,000 gallon vats to gaze upon. Please,
is that what we're calling them?
Please, with haste, send me some styrene, please. Get me out of my misery.
All right. This prohibition lasted until 1933. Eisenhower, in addition to like New Deal shit and like what's his face was so bad. Hoover. Excuse me.
Yeah, fucking
did I say
Eisenhower.
Eisenhower? I did say
Eisenhower.
I'm a fucking moron. I put it in the notes too. No, Roosevelt.
When Franklin Delano Eisenhower.
Franklin Delano Eisenhower, yeah. Oh my fucking God. Yeah, this is what happens when you do an episode on beer is you drink a lot of beer when you're doing it just to remind you of beer, and then you forget other things.
Yeah. You forget who the president was.
Listen, I was not alive when either Roosevelt or Eisenhower were president, so
but you know of.
All right.
Yep.
Roosevelt was elected on a platform of, New Deal, but also repealing prohibition. Like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
We want to get rid of the shit.
We'll do some democratic socialism if that's the price for being able to drink beer again.
Yes.
DSA should do that shit again. Just like, we'll do the Green New Deal, but like, I don't know, just like beer subsidies.
You have to get rid of the war on drugs.
That's
one way of doing it.
That'd be pretty good, yeah.
Of course, some breweries were able to survive prohibition. They were able to diversify into soft drinks or ice cream or other lines of business. But lots of breweries closed up for good.
Distilleries, some of which were able to survive by making, wait for it, medicinal whiskey. Buffalo Trace, if you go there, if you ever find yourself in, I believe it's Frankfort, Kentucky, I've been there once, but if you go to Buffalo Trace, they will proudly tell you that they are one of the few distilleries to have survived Prohibition because they were able to keep making whiskey. And just say, no, it's for medicinal purposes. You had to get a doctor's note.
Yeah. Wineries and vineyards were able to keep going in some cases by doing sacramental wine or grape juice sometimes. Or as we talked about on, sorry about your COVID. Also, as we talked about on the Austrian wine tasting thing, sometimes you could just sell somebody a bunch of grapes or grape juice, and then with a label that's like, don't do this exact series of steps, or it will turn into wine.
That would be illegal. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when you buy like a little glass pipe that says for decorative use only from a gas station.
Oh, Jesus.
But one of the problems is you're in Prohibition, right? Alcohol commands a premium, right? You can brew beer clandestinely, and a lot of folks did, but beer was not like as commonly sought out as other forms of alcohol, right? If you're
going to make it count, yeah.
Do you want to have? You don't want to have like 5 kegs of beer, or do you want to have like, I don't know,
or just a case of whiskey?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so beer got the short shift on this one. It was much easier and more profitable to bootleg moonshine if you had a huge
and invent NASCAR.
And if you had like a huge mechanized operation that was required to brew pale lagers prior to Prohibition to exacting specifications, this was not something you could operate profitably anymore. Certainly, and you could not run it clandestinely. And after Prohibition, some breweries reopened, but the thing is, you're in the middle of the deepest part of the Depression.
Right.
Yeah, not. I mean, even in depressions, people like buying alcohol, but by this point, people don't like buying beer.
Yeah.
People want to get drunk cheaply and quickly. This is the same period where you get the growth of fortified wines because like wineries are able to like rebound more quickly.
Love me some grappa. It's delicious. It tastes
I do
like
love
gasoline.
grappa.
That's what I want. No, I do love grappa. I've never had a bad night when I've drank grappa because it disciplines me.
I of course, had some weird nights. I don't think I've ever had a bad night on grappa. I've had some weird fucking nights on grappa. There's just like 3:30, and I'm just texting like every girl I've ever met, just like, "Hey, what are you doing? Hey, what are you doing? Hey, what are you doing? Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, I'm not even ready to lead. I'm just like, I'm curious. I just want to know.
Yeah, you just want to check in.
Grappa makes you do weird stuff. Yeah, I agree with that one. So these breweries reopened in the middle of the Great Depression, and they struggled along for a while, and then World War II hit, and that meant there were rations on grain, including barley. So what do? You start replacing the barley with rice.
Gross.
And rice could start supplanting barley in a lot of recipes. It was cheaper. Lots of breweries switched over. And after World War,
following the same tradition as like patent malt, where you just like you get the percentage of the thing that allows you to flavor, and the rest is externality, and you ruthlessly eliminate that because it's costing you money.
Yes, I will defend patent malt. It actually works.
Well, so does using rice. You get a drinkable beer out of it. I don't know if I would call this the king of beers, but it's not bad.
It's fine, yeah. I agree with that one. The thing is, after World War II, these brewers did not switch back to barley. They kept brewing with rice. And that formed the base of what we call the modern American adjunct lager, right?
Eagle Screech goes here.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't fucking have one of those even. Do I even have any American patriotic drops? Probably not.
Pathetic.
I don't know.
Just use the East as red.
To put in this is actually an inter-prohibition between Prohibition and World War II advertisement here. The big PBR sign in Chicago.
Cool.
All right, so
why does it say Shorpy on the bottom right?
Sharpie?
Shorpy.
Yeah.
Shorpy.
Yes, Shorpy is this wonderful place where you can go look at a lot of extremely high-resolution photographs from a long time ago. It's great.
Huh. Cool.
I highly recommend Shorpy. You can get prints of them, too. I'm not affiliated with Shorpy. Neither is his podcast. But I like them because it's sometimes you can like find stuff from ages ago you would not see otherwise. I could have sworn we used this photo in the Lost episode.
Yes.
Which we should probably re-record.
We absolutely have. Yeah, we've used this.
Yeah. So, all right. So after this period of Prohibition and then World War II, you come out the other end. You got a booming economy. You have folks who are enthused about the future, which is something I wish I could experience.
Yeah, people, it was almost as if they knew that their entire life was going to be the highest standard of living in human history, and then it was all going to be downhill as soon as they started getting old and dying. And so they just like became gigantic pieces of shit.
After World War II, we get consolidation, and consolidation, right? The brewing industry fared surprisingly well under Prohibition. Like a lot of breweries made it out at the end. But during and after the war, quality went to shit. There were lots of local breweries in many cities. So you had like, I'm putting this Pabst Blue Ribbon sign up here. That was a Milwaukee beer. You had like Ortlieb's in Philly that lasted a long time. National Bohemian, that was in Baltimore. Again, lasted a long time. Ballantine, which made one of the last classic IPAs. That was in New York, New Jersey. You had Duquesne Brewing in Pittsburgh. We showed Christian Hurek in Washington, D.C. a while back. Some of these are producing unique and interesting beers. Most of them are producing swill,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, but it's local swill. You have your like cities like regional pride swill.
I mean, that's the thing about Philadelphia Brewing Company is they produce a local swill that's good.
I love you,
Kensinger.
It's garbage, but I like it.
All their other beers suck.
No, the Joe Porter is decent.
The Joe Porter's good, yes. The New Bold IPA is also good. So
Fleur de Lehigh is one of the worst beers I've ever had in my life.
oh my god, that's so bad. It's so fucking bad. Holy shit, that's a bad beer. And it's annoying because it's like named after like this the good baseball field. The Connie Mack Stadium. Which unfortunately was burned down in the 1980s. It was one of the I would say one of the best of the original baseball fields out there. Yeah, it was a beautiful stadium, and yeah, burned down. Phillies left; they moved down south, down to South Philly. Not actually moved down south, like
Boston Brave.
Shit.
Yeah, the Atlanta
Boston
Phillies.
Yeah,
Boston
they
Braves.
went all
Yeah,
over the goddamn place, or out west because Philly has lost the Warriors. Philly has lost. God, who else?
the
The
Athletics.
Athletics. There you go. Yeah,
Wait,
they're
the
ours,
Oakland
bitch.
Athletics?
Yeah, they're the Philly
Yes.
Athletics.
Really?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Give them back.
I never
Give
knew
them fucking
that.
back.
Yeah, give Philly back the A's.
I want a team I can hate even more than I already hate the Phillies.
All right, so lots of these breweries are producing swill. Lots of recipes are being adapted for the brewery equipment that's available, right? So if you're brewing an ale, this starts to become a cream ale, right? Which is like yeah. So this is like, if you ever had
Fucking FDR took all of my like malting floor and like all of my tanks to like use to make Shermans and Liberty ships.
Yeah, I'm libertarian now, thanks to this.
Yeah.
So you start to substitute in where you can use adjuncts as opposed to barley. You start doing so. Adjuncts are things that provide sugar, which is not barley. Your complex products,
like rice.
Rice, corn, so on and so forth. Your cream ale is like, that's a process where you can still technically call it an ale, but it has a lager profile, right? And breweries start to consolidate. All the beer was the same. It was all shitty. So who cared if Anheuser-Busch bought up your local brewery, right? And then it shut down its operations. Other than the workers, of course. They were pretty mad. The market was not very quickly. This was a process of 40, 50 years, dominated by a few brands. Miller, Coors, Anheuser-Busch. There were some holdouts like Pabst. Pabst actually has, to this day, kept a couple of local breweries alive, although they're not brewed on location anymore.
They just bottle them there, or
Yingling also has obviously not given up the ship.
So, like, Pabst brews National Bohemian, which is the Baltimore beer, but it's all brewed and bottled in Milwaukee, right? And what else? Pabst does Schiefer is another one. They also do.
I think they do Old German.
Yeah, they do a couple of like really shit tier beers, which they decided to keep around. Although I like National Bohemian because it tastes like the Inner Harbor.
get that Columbus experience.
It is not brewed. I want to say this to all of our Baltimore fans, who are all goddamn morons, and I love your city. I've been going to your city for years. I spent a huge amount of my youth doing drugs in your city. National Bohemian is not fucking brewed in Baltimore. National Bohemian is brewed in North Carolina, Georgia, Ohio, I believe Milwaukee. Not fucking brewed, because people will fight you on it. People will honestly fight you on it. Be like, no, it's brewed in Baltimore. No, it's fucking not.
Yeah, the two great like fighting positions of Baltimore. Ray Rice is good, and Natty Boh is brewed in Baltimore, and neither is
I will
correct.
say that like one of my favorite things about people from Baltimore, which obviously I have a like a spiritual connection to Baltimore. I was like I grew up around there, and I went there, but just like Philly gets this city as being very like combative and annoyed just at everything. Philly wishes it could be as pissed off as Baltimore is all the time. Like it's just absolute total. Like Philly's wild, but like Baltimore's just like I'll just burn it. We'll just burn it. Like where they the first time they ever played a Major League Baseball. I mean, not the first time, but I believe Major League Baseball games without any fans. Baltimore never do that shit in Philly. You just get arrested in Philly. Baltimore's just like we can't even have people in this stadium. Also, I remember Rheingold. Rheingold is my favorite. This is when my parents were still drinking, which dates them. They drank Rheingold, which was tragic, and I just learned that it was owned by Jewish people, and I feel a special connection. But like my favorite thing about just shit American beers is how everyone's just like, yeah, craft beer is really good. Yeah, it's like craft beer kind of sucks though, and I long for the days where I could buy a 6-pack for $2. I'm sorry.
Of like mediocre, like American adjuncts.
Winding road here.
I just remembered.
Oh no, it's fine.
The drop that I wanted added to the drop catalog, which was Brett Kavanaugh saying, "I like beer."
Oh, I like beer. Yeah, when his voice kind of cracks, he sounds kind of like a Muppet.
Yeah,
I like beer.
That was the one we should have had for this episode. Anyway, after Prohibition, there's major consolidation. Those that remained were like, they were either able to survive on reserves or they had alternate business. You had places like Yuengling, which is basically an accident of history, and also Coal Country refuses to drink
really
anything other.
I have an aside for why I love Yuengling. Why I love you? Shut up.
Oh, another one. Good.
I love Yuengling.
Fuck it, we'll do a 5-hour episode. I don't give a shit.
So my girlfriend has lived around Philly her entire life, and she was talking to a friend of mine who grew up in York, and she was like, "Oh," and like kind of like not bragging, being like, "Oh, like this bar, like great happy hour specials. I can get Yuengling for $4 a pint." And my friend points out, back where we're from, you could get Yuengling sometimes for $1 a pint if you know the right place. And I was just like, I will drink 14 of these, get in my car, drive 25 miles, and it won't matter because DUI is not real in York County.
I mean, listen. When we recorded the first episode, I was like, we're getting back on top of this. We got it under an hour and a half.
And we still got a bunch to go. All right. Forwards.
Vorwärts.
Yes.
Schnell. Mach schnell.
So, some accidents of history. Yuengling, right? Basically an accident of history. Coal Country can't do without Yuengling.
Change.
No one wanted to buy it. No one wanted to sell it.
Go to Shinokin and get 6 pints for $5. What are you complaining about?
Oh my God, that was wonderful. So Pabst, actually I wanted to explain the sign. Pabst Blue Ribbon, you might see here, blended 33-1. What did that mean?
What did it mean, Roz?
33 parts piss to 1 part beer.
No.
You're not wrong.
PBR is fine.
Yes.
It's fine.
Yes.
You're over here bitching and moaning. I like a lager. I don't like IPAs. My name's Alice. Blah. Here's a fucking lager just for you, you big fucking...
No.
I want the lager that tastes like the Chernobyl graphite core.
We don't quite have at this point in time. This is interesting. This sign was erected between Prohibition and World War II because it was taken down in World War II for scrap because they were blended 33-1 means that they would brew 33 different batches of PBR. They would blend them all together, and then that was what went in the can. That's how they did consistency because they didn't quite have like the extreme chemistry we have today.
Man, I mean, one of the things that I like in a beer is that I want to be able to like open a can and be like, man, this is going to be exactly like the previous can that I just finished, which I definitely remember the taste of.
Yes.
Yeah,
you do want that.
A lot of people want consistency. That's like that's not unheard of. Well, let me ask you this, Alice. You've got $12 Alice,
Okay.
or whatever you have in made up bullshit money.
Yeah, I have 12 guilders or whatever.
People are using. Now you go down to the off license because you people live in hell, and you think to yourself,
correct.
I'd rather have 6 beers, all of a reasonable ABV. I know if I drink 6, I'll get drunk.
Yeah.
Or would I rather spend more money, and the beer is going to be possibly wildly inconsistent? Maybe it'll be good. Maybe it won't be good. Maybe it'll be great. Who the fuck knows? If you're a working person and you have X amount of dollars, how dare you?
I will say this much. Sometimes a woman will find herself in an experimental mood and she'll be like, man, I don't know. Maybe I'd like to try a bunch of different beers. And if I don't like the taste of it, I just keep drinking and then it doesn't matter. I would call that out logicked and out fucking skilled, and you have like lost to the merciless elbow strikes of debate and reason in the octagon of mind palace intelligence.
Congratulations, Ben. I'm so proud of you.
Now in Canada, this actually got worse. They had prohibition for a lot less time than we did, but their brewery consolidation was much worse. Right, by the time
I didn't know they even had prohibition.
They had prohibition very briefly, and it was all the breweries consolidated into Molson, Labatt, and Carling O'Keefe.
Alice, I actually have a question. Was there ever a prohibition, meaningful one, in Western countries beyond the United States and Canada? I mean, I understand.
Not to my knowledge, I don't think we ever did it. Yeah, I don't think we ever banned alcohol in that way. Certainly not in Britain.
Do you know if Canadian prohibition ended up? Because I see that there was a vote on 1898, but do you know if that had any effects on like Canadian distilling and why their whiskey is so goddamn bad?
I don't know anything about Canadian distilling other than it's not good.
There were a few.
Everything was like consolidated very quickly, and the fact that like Carling O'Keefe is a brewery is like very strange to me.
They had a few Nordic countries that did do prohibition, as it turns out. The Faroe Islands, which are like insane Christian headbangers, banned alcohol from 1907 to 1992.
Oh my god.
Sweden rationed it until 1955, and Iceland had prohibition from 1915 until 1922, although they kept beer banned until 1989.
Oh my god.
Yeah, you had to mix it with spirits. You could get away with that by having like a Boilermaker.
Boilermakers for everyone.
I was in Ireland, and I was there on Good Friday, and the guy was like, "Oh yeah, it's Good Friday, so we can't sell you liquor." And then the next sentence was, "But I can put some in lemonade, and if you want to say it's lemonade, that's fine." It's Ireland. Just
So we have to go to the next set of notes. So in Britain, there were some other developments occurring as a result of, increases on taxes on beer's original gravity, which happened during World War I and World War II. As opposed to prohibition, they just started increasing the taxes on higher alcohol beer, right? And that meant beer got weaker and it got shittier, right?
Yep. Yeah, you just have like a pint of bitter that like tastes like a couch and does nothing for you.
Yeah, it's like 3.2% alcohol or some crap like that.
Yeah.
And it was, and this is one of the ways that like pale lagers came into favor over time. over your weak ass British bitter ale, right?
Yeah, that's wherefore we get our current British culture of binge drinking is readily available lager that will actually get you drunk if you drink a lot of it.
I remember reading something where someone was bitching and moaning about how IPAs are too boozy now. They were just like, why do we not look to the British who have, they're really
the British seen here passed out on a park bench.
We bring up, every football hooligan in the world. And they said, well, all the British beers are like 4.5%. It's like, well, A, that's not true. And B, yes, but you're still drinking 5 trillion of them. Like, so who gives a shit?
Yeah, if you drink 20 pints, as like one conservative minister, William Hague, once claimed that he had done as a young man, if you drink 20 pints of pretty much any alcohol, including hand wash, you're gonna have a fun time, regardless of like the ABV.
I don't know if I've drank 20 pints. I have definitely drank 20 12-ounce cans of beer.
I don't care to know what my record is, but I know that it is well north of 30.
What I will say is that past a certain point, and I'll say for me, it's about, I don't know, 7, maybe 6 or 7. You're just a hose. Like you're digesting alcohol, but you're just like pissing at the same rate.
The gang beats bugs.
One of my favorite things is that, like, as Ross and I are both big boys, like when people are just like very rarely say it to us, but sometimes they're visibly like, oh, I'm gonna play keep up with Liam and Roz. In terms of just beer drank, and inevitably it leads to somebody nearly dying. Sometimes Roz.
Yeah, the first live show is going to be, again, with the Indiana Jones references, me doing Karen What's-Her-Face trying to like drink you guys onto the table, except I will not succeed.
All right, let's get
the first live show will end with one of our faces melting.
Not me. I'm Jewish.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm Jewish.
You
got the most Aleutian.
As a result of these taxes on original gravity, beer in Britain by the middle of the 20th century had half the alcohol content of beer in the early 19th
so what are we talking
century.
About, like 3.5 right? Or less than that?
Yeah, 3.5. Guinness still has like basically the same alcohol as it had in the 1950s, right? This used to be a 7% beer. Now it's like 3.5, right?
Extra stout, allegedly.
Extra stout still has like a high alcohol. They haven't really changed that too much, although I believe they stopped brewing it sometime in the 70s and then brought it back because they thought there was no market for it anymore. Because the doldrums of beer were a real thing. Yeah. Like no one could figure out what the hell was beer anymore in the 1970s.
You know what's interesting? You know what's interesting is that this happened in Germany too. Like you mentioned Hell, right? You mentioned Hellas. That occupied a kind of similar space to British domestic beers, where it was like this trad thing that just got weaker and weaker as Pilsner and Lager got stronger and stronger. And so you had lots of like local German breweries that made like, I don't know, like a Kieles Hell or whatever the fuck. And like people would keep drinking it and then it would just go out of business because lager was unstoppable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing is like the German style of pale lager like dominated on 6 continents.
Wow.
You can like get a German lager, a German sort of Hell's lager. You know, you can get a Kingfisher in India.
Your favorite beer.
You can get a Hashi dry beer in Japan.
You can get a Tusker in Kenya.
Yeah. You can get
Tsingtao, which was like a German colonial possession in China.
Yeah. You know what? This is a perfected style. It tastes the same everywhere.
Yep.
It's delicious. Yep. It's very good. All of them are very good.
Mm-hmm.
But like also, you know, this was just the dominant style of beer and there was like no alternatives, right? You couldn't like brew a different kind of beer. And as a result, like beer looked kind of done for a while, right? It was universally, especially in the United States, it was swill, right? It was losing market share to liquor. And liquor had the advantage of it, it tasted good as well as getting you drunk real fast. And
yeah, you can mix it with stuff.
No one knew what to do except for one man. That man was Michael Jackson.
Also Jewish. Also Jewish. Also Jewish.
No, really?
Yeah.
I would never have guessed
the name from Jackowitz to Jackson.
Just, yeah. Fucking, like, Fidel Castro-ass jacket.
Yes. That man basically saved beer all by himself, and every picture of him is increasingly hilarious.
He looks the way I feel.
He died of Parkinson's very young at 65.
Oh no!
But yeah, I one of the things that gives me strength and comfort in these times is just finding pictures of him, because he always looks kind of baffled. Like, he always looks a little surprised
he's just like, what
that
the
he's
fuck
here.
is this?
And I'm just like, that's how I aspire to live my life, is become the world's like foremost authority on beer. Basically save one of the oldest beverages by yourself, and just like look like that all the time. Yeah. That's what I want out of my life.
All right. So the thing about Michael Jackson, remember how we've talked about various different styles of beer over the course of this episode, right? The beers were different.
He invented them.
He was the first person to think that, like, there are different styles of beer. Beer is not just beer. There are different ways you can make beer. And no one had quite thought to put this into writing before. In different places, they make different kinds of beer.
Because they were too busy drinking.
They have different flavors, right? And so in 1977, he published the World Guide to Beer, which is an absurdly comprehensive guide to every kind of beer. Not every kind of beer, but like most kinds of beers that were being brewed in 1977, which, of course, this was during the bad times of beer. This was during the times when, like, people were like, beer is shit. I mean, I remember an anecdote from someone who interviewed Mr. Ortlieb, who was the brewer at Ortlieb's Brewery here in Philly. That was our last macro brewer before it was shut down because they couldn't compete with, the big macro brewers. And they're like, well, we need like a better kind of beer to, compete with these. We need a new flavor. And they're like, we're going to make a martini flavored beer. Right. And it's like, no, that's not the way you're going to do it. Like, the way forward with beer is beer. Right. But this was, again, like, prior to Michael Jackson coming in and saying, there are many different kinds of beer. We can think about beer in a different way, right? There's more to beer than just, having a big bag of cans with the lads.
We say, to attempt to disprove this, by getting together with our podcast friends and becoming quite drunk. We're gonna rehabilitate this alcoholic drink. I say tune like 40 minutes into the fucking episode and about to fall off my fucking chair.
Look, we're all gonna make it through this. We have a task ahead of us.
Right. Task and purpose. Gun
country. Hi, Joe.
All right, let's go.
Bye, Joe Kasabian, super. Moving on.
All right. So our next character is the Campaign for Real Ale.
Because I am a dirty, great, big Five Nations fan.
So
it's a reference there to Cameraman by Half Man, Half Biscuit, which summarizes the kind of guy who gets very into the Campaign for Real Ale.
Here's the thing. The Campaign for Real Ale, I think, at the end, achieved some really anti-capitalist goals. Yeah.
The Beer Liberation Front did a great deal, but that does not discount from the fact that the general vibe of every camera guy is like leather vest, BDSM polycule, goatee, Pratchett books, Cheap Trick live at the Budokan, Just
That's also the worst fucking thing about American beer nerds is that like they're like all these great breweries are doing like cool shit like no one's ever done before and making beer taste in ways you wouldn't expect it. But like they're all such goddamn dorks and a lot of them are assholes.
yeah, I love to
Just
like
act
have
normal.
my
Just
I love to
act
have a
normal.
special brew for my hand fasting. I'm wearing a leather cowboy hat indoors. I am repairing like a 70s van and I have it in bits.
Hey.
Yeah. I realize that all criticism is autobiography. I'm just saying that's the beer nerd niche.
That's true. I can see at that point.
We have a time limit on this podcast
Fuck
because
you,
I'm
no, we
returning
don't,
to
bitch.
strong beer after this one. All right, so the big nerds to camera, the campaign for real ale. This actually started slightly before Michael Jackson started getting real into beer. They get organized to fight to save what little of good beer was left, right? They had a definition of real ale, right? That's cask conditioned ale. As we...
Their own little Reinheitsgebot.
Yes. As we mentioned before, this is ale. It still has hops added, but it's fermented in such a way that natural carbonation, is added to the beer because it's put in a cask before it finishes carbonating, and it's served via that natural carbonation and also gravity, right? It's also served at a warmer temperature.
Yeah. Cask temperature is not warm necessarily. It's closer to like room temperature, but like the image of warm beer is so gross that it lodges in people's minds. And so the idea is that these guys are sitting around drinking kind of like skunky, like warmer than average beer. And it's like gross. And that's only partially true. And I feel the need to defend them a little bit. It's not cold. You're not drinking it cold like you would a lager, but it's not warm either. It's like neutral, like a wine.
Well, it's like, okay, so Guinness developed the widget as well as the nitrogen dispensing system. The nitrogen dispensing system wasn't until like the late 50s, early 60s. In order to dispense the beer with the same level of carbonation as like what we might call real ale had, but also at a colder temperature. And then cask conditioned ale is like still, it's dispensed at around 58, 59 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is in...
Double it and add 30. So
116. Wait, no, the other way around.
Degrees Celsius, yes. It's the same with it's the same with miles per hour, right? Is that like you double it and add 30, right?
Yeah, I love to like steer my entire
Yes. I paid for the whole
just burning off my entire fucking esophagus. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, 58 degrees Fahrenheit in Celsius is 14 degrees, which is considerably cooler than room temperature. It's like, it's a cool day outside if it's 14.
Yes. So, the whole thing is a rebellion against like kegging, which when Campaign for Real Ale starts, it's a new thing in England, right? Where, these are highly carbonated beers that are served at low temperatures, and Guinness's newfangled nitrogen thing. And at this point, you have like the big 6 breweries in Britain who basically dominate the beer market. They're Whitbread, Scottish and Newcastle, Bass, Charrington, Allied Breweries, Courage, Imperial, and Watney's.
Watney's?
Watney's, yeah. So The campaign for real ale being made of nerds, just dumb nerds, were like, they were successful in convincing the public and parliament that these big six breweries had undue influence on the British beer industry and beer drinking. That resulted in the Supply of Beer Order of 1989.
Yeah,
which added
anti-capitalist beer nerds.
Yeah, dumb shits. They're like fucking nerds, and they were like, no, they achieved a good goal, which is that it added strict limits to the amount of pubs a brewery could own. They broke the beer monopolies. A couple of these big six actually moved into owning pubs as opposed to brewing beer at the end.
Pubcos, baby.
Yeah.
That's why you have one guest beer at every, even the Tide pubs they have now. They have to have one guest beer. Although that's been, I understand, tied into the system now.
Yeah, but still, though, that's more antitrust legislation than pretty much any pressure group has achieved against a monopoly in recent memory.
Yeah. I mean,
and these fucking dudes who are like, yeah, I make my own floggers in my spare time, and I like fucking have a bunch of Liz Phair CDs. Those guys affected it, and that rules.
You know, this is a good thing. I'm glad they did it. Thank God.
This episode is dedicated to the noble mujahideen of the campaign for real ale.
Yes, and then in America, we're again in the doldrums where like no one can figure out like how do we make beer better. We have, one of the problems is that homebrewing was illegal from Prohibition until 1978.
Thanks, Gerald Ford.
Yes, it was legalized in the United Kingdom in 1963.
Yeah, I got a filing cabinet full of fermenting casks as we speak.
But one of the things is once homebrewing becomes legal again, folks can brew beer for fun and profit. So what we now call craft beer starts with the New Albion Brewing Company in 1976, notably slightly before the Prohibition was relieved. In Sonoma, California, the founder homebrewed in Scotland, where it was still legal.
Another great example of, along with this podcast, of Scottish-American cultural exchange. Yeah.
I mean, early craft breweries here in the United States were very English-influenced because that's where all the recipe books come from. There were a lot of recipe books available for brewing in the public domain, in libraries and stuff like that. They didn't have the internet back then, obviously. So there wasn't just like a wealth of information available. If you wanted to learn about like these brewers had to work with American hops and American malts, which I should have put something in earlier in the episode. A lot of the Burton Pale Ale brewers were actually working with American hops.
Also, Yards makes a good porter. I forgot about that, but Yards makes a good porter. Moving on.
They have a stout, but the stout's crap.
No,
what's the porter?
Washington Porter.
I haven't had the Washington Porter enough for it to have left a memory in me. So a lot of these early craft breweries are very English influenced. They work with American hops and malts. New Albion itself closed fairly quickly, but like once folks had been like, "Oh, we can open our own breweries,"
just everybody starts doing it.
The revolution started real quick. So 1979 was Sierra Nevada. They started up in Chico, California. 1984 was Boston Beer Company. That was Sam Adams, so on and so forth. 1985, Dock Street in Philly. First woman-owned brewery. Also, their employees are on strike just down the street from us right now.
Nothing pleasant to say about Dock Street or their
hire more women strike breakers.
Oh my God.
It is an absolute asshole.
I mean, when the pandemic started, they laid off all their front of, I think at least front of house.
Yeah, and then made them all reapply for their jobs. Yes. I do not believe that it applied to back of house. Could be wrong, but I don't think I am.
All right, so now everyone and their brother has a brewery, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's good, right? Some of them are small and independent. Some of them are medium size. Some of them are huge, like Boston Brewing Company.
Sam Adams.
Right. Which, yeah, Sam Adams. Yeah. And one of the things is like they got so big so quickly that like they had to redefine what a craft brewery was to make sure they were still a craft brewery, which is why Yingling is now a craft brewery.
Sam Adams also bailed out a whole bunch of breweries a few years ago during a hop shortage.
Oh yeah, the hop shortage was like a hell of a thing.
So now it's let 100 flowers bloom, right? And we get all of these weird fucked up taps.
And in some cases gave the hops away to other breweries so that they could stay in existence.
The guy who runs it doesn't he need a handler because he's so drunk all the time.
I was this is anecdotal, but it's coming from me. I was at a Philly Beer Week event a few years ago, and Jim Koch, the head brewer at Sam Adams, was there. Very nice guy, very friendly guy. But he was, and I mean this, shit-faced drunk. Not falling all over himself, shit-faced drunk, but like clearly intoxicated. And somebody who was with him was like, "All right, Jim," like, but the other guy was not drinking. He looked very serious. And I was just like, does Jim Koch have a handler just in case he gets too drunk? Nice guy. He bought me beer, which was fucking sick. But like, yeah, I love the idea. Also, if you watch some of the old Sam Adams ads on YouTube, you can tell that a lot of them are pretty clearly drunk. And like, that's the way a brewery should be run. That's the Stoneworth privilege. Stoneworth privilege.
We never talked about the Stoneworth privilege during this episode. Yeah.
I'm suddenly reminded of, again, not beer, but wine. Late career, late stage Orson Welles, morbidly obese, doing a commercial for Paul Masson. And if you haven't seen the video of Orson Welles' Paul Masson wine commercial, you owe it to yourself to pause now, look it up on YouTube, and then like start listening again, because it is the most I've heard a man slur, and he just kind of like pronounces from atop this mountain of gut. There is a California champagne by Paul Masson, inspired by that same French excellence. And it continues like this for minutes.
No, I have seen that.
Indescribable.
And I was like, yes, I would like to be Orson Welles. Sure, let me do that.
Yeah.
Let me produce the greatest film in history and then just be Orson Welles. Let me like scare New Jersey.
Happy, yeah.
Let me scare New Jersey half to death and then be Orson Welles.
It's fermented in a bottle, and like the 5 French champagnes is vintage dated.
All right, so you have craft beer now, right? And there's many kinds of craft beer. You know, you have your American IPA, you have your West Coast American IPA, you have your East Coast American IPA, you have your Cascadia Ale, you have your
too many IPAs,
hazy bullshit New England IPA. You have your Belgian Congo Pale Ale.
Fucking excuse me.
Talk about this. That brewery is now owned by AB InBev.
Anheuser-Busch. Yes. And
cool. I own a share of this, in that I'm drinking a Budweiser right now.
I believe
cool.
I believe this beer is still brewed under another name. They started brewing and they were like, "Oh, well, I guess we can't use this name."
Well, like, yeah, the like offensive IPA is absolutely like three. There's been 1.5 million ones where they'll just like find a Native American thing that they think sounds cool, and then all of a sudden they're fielding a bunch of calls from angry Lakota who are like, "Yeah, please do not, extremely do not do this shit."
There are, I mean, too much to even name, but there's like so many goddamn
Heyoka in Chicago
that fly way too close to the sun and do all these fucking inexcusably stupid. And I'm not saying, like, I'm not here to judgmentality, but I am telling you that it's dumb as dog shit. You're grown fucking adults. You can make a beer that tastes good without pissing a bunch of people off. And if for what it is for you, it's just like, it's a name. Fuck yourselves. Go fuck yourself.
It's an edgy. It's like an edgy two-fisted kind of like marketing ploy. It's such offensive bullshit always. Whether that's like the actually offensive stuff of having a Belgian Congo Pale Ale, Jesus Christ, or even or just like regular BrewDog cringe, where it's like, this beer is the maximum that the government lets us brew. We call it nanny state.
It's like there's shit.
Well, Flying Dog did the Raging
Bitch.
Bitch
And what did
Belgian
the Supreme
IPA.
Court over it?
Yeah.
Jesus
Flying
Christ.
Dog, the guy who owns Flying Dog is an old school Colorado libertarian, which is why all their art is done by Ralph fucking Steadman.
That rules, to be
They
fair.
make some really good beers. Yeah,
it's like at least y'all put your money where your mouth. Yeah, at least you put your fucking money where your mouth is. Like, it's like they've financially supported. They filed amicus briefs on behalf of lawsuits for a band called I'm not actually going to say the name of the band because I really don't want to, but
the C word for Asians.
That's a band, and Flying Dog filed an amicus brief to support them because basically the idea is as this person I should be able to name my product or my band whatever the fuck I want. Leave me alone. And then the Washington football team signed on to that lawsuit because of course they did.
Awesome.
The band was all Chinese Americans for reference.
And Flying Dog at least does important stuff like the Maryland Hop Research Project and shit like that. But that's a lot fucking different than just, whatever, like, craft brewery in North fucking Dakota doing some insane shit. Like, there have been beers that have made, like, domestic abuse jokes and shit like that. And, like, this is so fucking cheap.
The only good kind of gimmick name for a beer is when it's like a local feature, like that North Carolina brewery that did the Elevator Lady beer, because due to some obscure law, North Carolina requires that every elevator have a like signed document from a state inspector with a headshot on it of them, and so like this one woman just got like sort of unwillingly famous in North Carolina because her face was in every elevator, and they made a beer like in tribute to her. That's gimmicky as shit, but it's not like it's harmless. Exactly. I think it's kind of
also,
cute.
Like Foothills Brewery, also in North Carolina, had a beer called Sexual Chocolate. They've now since changed. They've not changed the name, but they have changed the label, which was like your classic sort of like sexualization of a black woman. And it's like, this is just a fucking beer. Like, you don't need to do this. And the fact that you're doing this is just cheap and shitty. Shall we proceed?
Shall we?
Yeah, I was about to say, like,
Bazinga.
I said this off the recording, but this is what I think when I'm drinking a beer.
Yeah, you enjoys the funky beats.
Yeah, this is funky beats. Yeah, I enjoy the funky beers.
No, you don't. You fucking liar.
This is for Liam. I asked him to make a malt liquor
It's a picture
slide.
of my face on it. That's delightful. All right, so I'm gonna.
Congrats on being Turbo Matt Chrisman.
Speaking of weird ass marketing, let's talk about malt liquor. So malt liquor is introduced in the 50s as a plot by the CIA to lower black men's sperm counts. No, because the original marketing was to middle-class white people, hence the name Country Club and Old English. It actually wasn't it wasn't until really the 70s or 80s that malt liquor started being marketed to black people. And no one could really figure this out because like the marketing wasn't to black people. It wasn't less or more expensive. It wasn't higher or lower ABV necessarily. But so, beer marketing being what it is, they fucking ran with it and just made,
same as menthols.
Right, it's just like, we're going to make this as, like, caricature and all these, like, really gross stereotypes as possible.
This is our black people revenue stream.
And, like, a lot of wildly gross marketing. But, the whole concern with, like Colt 45 being like, it works every time. The idea being, like, you're going to get drunk. Some of that like very strange marketing.
Did get Billy D in like a velour sweatsuit though. That was cool.
Was like, we need there's I think on Thrillist or somewhere else where Drink is a history where they kind of offhandedly say like, we needed a black spokesperson who still kind of looked white. So malt liquor, despite my love for it, has an especially grody and disgusting kind of history associated with it. There's some stuff like
up there with fortified wine, which is like a winery's attempt to bounce back from prohibition by like exploiting like racism and urban decay by like just like infiltrating liquor stores with Thunderbird or MD 2020 or the other one that I don't remember the name of. And so, or like Buckfast here, which is like the bane of fucking existence in Scotland.
There's the no one really knows why black people started buying it, but the whole like, we're just gonna market to poor black people, and do some really gross advertising there. And obviously, the introduction of 40s. 40s go back to at least World War II, but it's thought that the first malt liquor 40 was probably in the early 80s. There's just a bunch of shit. Like I said, the marketing has been super gross. I will.
I mean, bear in mind, like beer companies. Yeah, beer companies in the 80s were fully on some like the old dudes from Trading Places shit.
There's a malt liquor launched in the 90s called Crazy Horse. Launched by an Italian guy from fucking Staten Island. Boy. Also, like, of course. And obviously, you're talking racial targeting in the 90s. Philly, in fact, pushed through legislation to limit takeout malt liquor, even though it's none of their goddamn business, because of course you don't buy it in restaurants. So it's just the whole idea of targeting problematic and nuisance, shit like that.
Oh yeah. But same with any open container laws, which are going to be used disproportionately to harass and then criminalize black people. Like one of the consequences of the 92 LA riots was burning a lot of liquor stores, not on the basis that like, as is often suggested, people just wanted to loot them. Like, no, people can afford liquor. The problem was that they didn't want them in their communities. And they affected that by means of some direct action.
Exactly. I mean, this is simply this is essentially one large marketing ploy. And then obviously they shifted the marketing from, kind of aspirational class white people to black people. And it's some pretty gruesome shit in the middle of it. And now I will move on to Four Loko, my one true love.
Your one true love until you tried to drink a can of it several hours ago.
So Four Loko and several other beverages were the first to kind of come to market with, caffeinated, let's call it an alcoholic energy drink. So
Buckfast did this first. Buckfast was heavily caffeinated, and the result of this was that you drank it and you wanted to do some violent crimes.
I haven't heard of this. What's Buckfast?
Buckfast is a kind of fortified wine. It's caffeinated. It's made by monks in an abbey in England and then shipped up to Scotland, where I believe that there is some data to suggest that Police Scotland did a longitudinal study of this, and they found that where alcohol was like provably involved in a violent crime and they could identify the brand of it, it was Buckfast in 70% of cases. It's very much marketed to it's marketed to desperation. It's marketed as the kind of thing that you want to drink on the street, smash the bottle, and then try to like cut someone's face up with the smashed bottle.
But it's brewed by monks, right?
Oh yeah, and they disclaim all responsibility for this shit.
Right. We'll go to Scotland. How can I get some?
You can probably like get some shipped to you pretty easily, and I highly recommend it. Because like it's sometimes called wreck the hoose juice, right? You drink it and you will destroy your home. And
oh god,
yeah, no, it smells very strongly, it tastes very strongly. I can't recommend consuming it, but I would say buy a bottle to share. and like see what you think.
I like the idea of I have a religious exemption to brew like basically PCP juice.
Yeah, it's
Essentially, yes. Yeah, like
I mean, it is the OG for Loco.
It tastes incredibly sweet. Like you will not be aware of how much alcohol you're drinking as you're drinking it. I'm always very resistant to the idea that like different alcohols have qualitatively different effects. Like, oh, I always get drunker on tequila or whatever. But like, Buckfast is
I get drunker on tequila.
Pretty drunk.
Yeah.
I will say
this is true. Yeah.
But Buckfast is like the devil's work.
Have you ever had a sipping tequila? You know,
I like a nice añejo. I like a Patron. I had a really nice. Chris got a Calle like 23 for his birthday, and that was delicious.
Tequila is good.
Like you were derailing me.
Where were we? Yes.
We were talking about Four Loko. Yeah.
So
we were talking about Four Loko, and like apparently there is a Christian exemption to this. Yes,
but this was the heathen, like unchristian version of caffeinated alcohols.
So it actually starts in the United States with the introduction of Sparks in 2002. Four Loko gets introduced in 2005, and so obviously, like, I'm not going to get into great detail, but the way caffeine interacts with alcohol in the brain is essentially caffeine allows you essentially to drink more because it helps to take away when your body says, I have to stop.
The signals that you start feeling bad.
So it just pushes through. So a whole bunch of So a whole bunch of kids died in 2009, 2010. Although I believe Sparks agreed to remove caffeine in 2008.
Did you have? Because like I remember Four Loko being introduced and then banned. I remember the scandal being that kids would drink too much and then die. Did you have like a wave of violent crime associated with it? Because I
will say that I was a freshman in college when they banned it, and in my possession are two of the OG Four Loko cans, which I will never ever surrender under any circumstances. But yeah, I like if kids drank, they like bad shit was gonna happen. Basically, it was a guarantee. And I remember like there was stuff like juice, which was knockoff Four Loko, which the liquor store or the beer distributor next to us where we used to live used to sell for $1 a can, as you know. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of legal concerns about like, hey, we probably should stop putting caffeine in energy drinks because they can kill or in alcohol because it can kill people. Despite the fact that right this very second you could walk into a bar and buy a Red Bull and vodka. I will say that like I always thought they should bring back OG Four Loko, and what I would do, and this is actually my dad's idea, is you introduce 22-ounce bottles, not cans, bottles. And you sit there with a straight face and say, well, it's not meant to be consumed in one serving.
I mean, that is kind of Buckfast's vibe. Is like you talk to the monks about, why do so many people get like stabbed with your bottles? And they're like, I don't know, we're supposed to like, you're supposed to enjoy it as like a table wine or something. I have never ever encountered anyone who has drunk Buckfast at a table, or I haven't encountered a lot of people who drink Buckfast who own a table.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion when I talk about Four Loko is that like obviously the whole shtick of these brands is like this kind of winking acknowledgement that the idea is to get you as fucked up as possible. And while I'm fine with that, I wish they would taste less like garbage. And I wish the marketing would stop being so goddamn stupid. Because it's just...
Well, like Four Loko and stuff are marketed to kids, like students, right?
It's $3.
College kids. Whereas Buckfast is marketed towards poverty, let's say. Not so much the kind of straight alcoholism that gets you to like high alcohol ciders or anything, but the kind of thing where you're hanging out on the street, you might do some Valium, you might stab a guy, who knows? just make your night take a direction.
Which is funny because all alcohol marketing is bullshit, as you and I were talking about before we recorded. But just like I really do wish that like if you're gonna lean into just fucking like one of the reasons these drinks suck so much ass is the marketing is so goddamn profoundly stupid. I just want to be able to get drunk cheap.
I never had a real Four Loko.
It tasted like ass, man. They all taste like ass. That's the whole point. $3.50 and you get drunk.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Right,
yeah,
moving on.
Sounds about right.
And I'm gonna get a beer.
Good Lord. Moving on. Onward, Christian Soldiers, which apparently entitles us to caffeinated wine.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs?
Art thou feeling it now, Mr. Krabs?
Wouldst thou like to live deliciously, Mr. Krabs?
All right, so we have to talk about crafty beer. Yeah, I felt like I was talking to Liam directly earlier when I saw a picture of him. Now it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is unfortunate. Anyway, so crafty beer, right? As like craft beer starts to become like a thing, right? Liam just definitely left his room right now.
To get more Four Loko.
That seems wise, yeah. So as craft beer, like it left the shed we looked at before.
Yes, and into like actual gentrified brewery properties.
Yeah, it became like a thing now.
Yeah.
A lot of bigger breweries decided, yeah, we should probably own some of this shit, including Anheuser-Busch, which is where we get like crafty beer, right? You see a Blue Moon, this is what we call not craft beer, but crafty beer, right?
Yeah, it has the vibe, but not the ownership structure.
Yes. And then this structure continues into like actual craft beer breweries. Like we saw the Belgian Congo Pale Ale earlier from Devil's Backbone.
Yeah.
They're now owned by Anheuser-Busch. And they make a nice Vienna lager that you can get from Virginia to Pennsylvania. But it's no longer a craft brewery. It's owned by Anheuser-Busch. They have some like remote brewing facilities, but like it's not like the creative decisions are left up to the previous brewmaster, but like how much they brew is up to the marketing team for Anheuser-Busch.
You approach the Simpsons gag where Duff Light, Duff Regular, and Duff Classic are all coming out of the same pipe into 3 different vats.
Yeah, you have that, and you have to adapt the recipes for these highly industrialized, specialized brewing systems that these breweries have set up, and you have to be like, okay, we're going to use 95% of these to make, I don't know, Budweiser. And then we're going to have this IPA, I guess, which is on like the 25th line. And we have to adapt the recipe somehow that we can like do this.
Every 25th bottle that comes off the line is going to be the racism IPA.
Well, I mean, that's the one thing, like they got rid of the racism IPA. That's no longer brewed anymore.
You just know there's like an inverse Liam who has like a couple of cases of it in a garage. And it's just like, I'm not giving these up.
The liberals. There was a guy who tried to...
Goddamn
liberal People's Republic.
There was a guy who tried to sue Miller Coors, parent of Blue Moon, for what, like deceitful marketing or something? Because he believes that like Blue Moon was actually
it contains no actual moon.
You said it was craft beer and it's not. And a guy really tried to sue Blue Moon, but like the confusion's on purpose. Like you're taking all these ideas from craft beer. Like there are so like as an example, I was at the it's a club in Sayreville, New Jersey. Got the Starlight Ballroom in Sayreville, New Jersey. And I was seeing Sheila Manifesto there, and they had a Budweiser branded like craft station. But all of those quote craft beers were beers owned by AB and Bev, and I was like, "Yeah, go fuck yourselves!" Like, it's not. I know it's not. Like, Stop fucking doing this. If like, why are you so ashamed to market it on its merits? Like,
well, we know why, and the reason why is that people associate like Anheuser-Busch or Coors or whatever with the kind of like light beer that they mostly produce, which is, and I say this as someone whose blood alcohol is now elevated because of it this evening. Swill, for hog people.
At least Miller Lite is good. I can't say so much for the other two light beers.
Love to get a Miller Lite
I
Ultra.
appreciate Bud Light putting its goddamn ingredients on the packaging. That is the thing that genuinely does piss me off.
Bud Light is not deceptive marketing. You know exactly what you're getting when you get a Bud Light.
Great. So all of us hate Coors.
Yes.
Great. Good.
I was at Landmark Grill at Drexel.
The bar in the gym.
I ordered a stout. I ordered a stout. One of two stouts on the menu because we're all five. And what did they bring me? A peanut butter stout. Normally, not a big deal. Except that my girlfriend is deathly allergic to peanuts. And I mean, seriously, like, any amount of exposure, I'm not going to fuck around with that. I don't give a shit. Like, she's going to the hospital. Like, and it was kind of like, you know what? Like, this is bullshit. And one of the reasons it's bullshit is that, like, half these fucking servers or bartenders don't know what you're putting in the shit. And you're expecting them to do your job. And it's just fucking insane. Like, just label the fucking beers. I'm so tired of breweries like Rogue just being like, I don't have to tell you the ABV. Just
Reinheitsgebot. The one time German exactitude has done us a favor is not there are 4 ingredients in the beer.
Yeah, you will be put for 1, 2, 3, 4.
Almost.
4 ingredients in the beer.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
Wasser, hops. I don't remember the rest. Anyway, one of the.
That's fine.
Yeah, who cares? It's like 5 hours.
Nine. Anyway, so
9.
We got 2 more slides left. Anyway, so 9. Thank you, Alice.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So, all right, and then the other problem is like you get crafty beer that's like Blue Moon and shit. You get like brew pubs and gentrification, right? Someone's going to start like a brew pub in your neighborhood, and it's like, oh god, this is going to be an issue. Another problem is like craft brewing, in particular, tends to be a little anti-union, right?
Yes, it
Because
does.
everyone, it's a small business that's starting up, and it's like we're all a family here.
Thus, Brace Belden's travails trying to unionize Anchor Steam Beer.
Anchor was an old ass company, is the other thing. Like Anchor has been around for ages. I'm surprised someone hasn't tried to salt the Yingling Brewery at this point.
Yeah, one thing I'm curious about, since we're going to talk about like how brewing and how like craft brewery has been this kind of very white, very male, very gentrifying force. If anyone has listened this far and knows, since we talked about print media, I'm curious if there were any like prominent black-owned breweries. If that was ever a thing.
There's at least one that just started up in Philly right now. I don't recall the name offhand, and they have.
I'm thinking more about previously. Like, at no point during any of this kind of like craft beer, revolution, it seems as if black people were successfully disenfranchised from it much more than print media.
Yeah, I mean, like craft brewing is extremely white, is the thing. Like it's like
two locals is going to be in Philly.
Okay, yeah, because like. What's it?
Most of
Saint
the time,
Ben's
you get 2 white guys with beards.
St. Ben's was like, yelling at. Was it St. Ben's? Was like yelling about like, oh, the locals are going to the brewery.
St. Ben's, I believe it was St. Ben's. There's no brewery anymore, so fuck them.
Well, yeah, I mean, the landlord kicked them out. I mean, I don't know. Maybe if people wanted to pay you for the beer, you should have served it to them.
And I mean, also, like incumbent to the anti-union thing is it sucks to work there.
Yeah.
Ask Brace, host of True and On, about Anchor, or you can like ask me about Brewdog, who fired a dude after he went blind.
Oh my God.
And like he wasn't working in like a brewery setting. He was like in the office adjacent to it. He could have done that same job, and they're just like, yeah, no, we're gonna have to let you go, actually. And I mean, he sued, and I think he eventually got some settlements out of them, probably not enough. But that's the kind of attitude. That's punk to me, is to fire an employee when they like develop a disability that you're not willing to accommodate.
Founders had a black employee who found a noose and I believe the N-word written on his locker, and Founders did an awful lot of work to be like, nah, and it was absolutely fucking embarrassing. Just goddamn, like, whether or not it's you, whether or not it's one of your employees, like, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, have the goddamn decency to be like, it'll never fucking happen again. We're firing everybody. We're gonna have training and shit. Like, and they really did run out the clock on that. It was absolutely fucking disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
Was it what's it? Evil Genius. They fired someone. I forget it was for
the brewmaster.
Yeah.
For basically saying Black Lives Matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
And people in Philly will defend Evil Genius and be like, their beer is good. You're an absolute goddamn moron. Their beer sucks ass. So do you.
No, the beer has always sucked ass, and they have the clever names, but like it's like bad.
They're just movie references.
Yeah, it's like I don't know, like it's some fucking Will Ferrell bullshit like every time.
Yep.
Oh God. All right. Which leads us to the next slide, which is consolidation in the beer industry. Oh, no, I was going to talk about bad beer, actually.
Yes.
A lot of the beer out there is bad.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Do you want a fucking pastry stout? I don't.
Jesus Christ.
The styles are really... That's one of the things that I think people kind of like aren't honest with themselves about, is this idea that like the default is that like, well, like, yes, like I would say that like your average lager made by whatever like craft brewery is probably better than Budweiser. But like they make all these styles that are absolutely fucking appalling, and like I understand like not taste for everyone, whatever. But as an example, Tired Hands, who is just full on hype machine brewery, people forming lines outside the fucking place, you know, this, that, the third, fucking trading and all that shit. They tried to make a stout called Only Void, and it was fucking horrible. It was genuinely horrible, and it was like, how you're supposed to be this next generation of like intensely good, very local, so on and so forth breweries that are serious about what they're doing, and you can't even brew a goddamn stout right.
No, get your novelty beer. It's a chocolate stout, but like it's not chocolate in like the brewing term. It tastes like chocolate, and that means that somebody like you're gonna go to a bar, your girlfriend's gonna order it because it sounds nice. She's gonna drink a third of it, and then they're gonna take the money, and it's not sustainable as a business practice. But also, it's fucking shitty beer.
So sometimes you'll get a chocolate stout that's actually good.
Yeah, I like
pastry stouts are universally bad.
Right, because the point is the sweetness of them. It's like we add all these fucking things in. Oh, it tastes like ice cream and it gets you drunk. Man, fuck off.
Yeah, if you want to do that, just drink mixed drinks.
Exactly.
We invented and we perfected a way for you to get drunk while tasting things that weren't alcohol, and it was called vodka. You can mix it with anything and you will not taste it.
If you like cake vodka from, you know, what's it in
Christ. The sickest I've been in my life was drinking absolute raspberry flavored vodka. I finished a like one of those kind of like stout bottles of that they have by myself because nobody else would. I knew I was going to regret it, and I paid for my sins deeply.
I also just hate this trend of like we have to add flavors to everything because like I actually get flavored vodka much more than I get flavored
it's an old idea.
That I'm fine with because like it's a neutral spirit, but I want it to taste like this thing. This is what I'm going for, and I want it to taste more like that. But you start getting into like flavored whiskeys, or when Fireball got really big, and people are just like, "Oh, I love Fireball." It's it's not even legally whiskey because it's below 80 proof, but sure, go off. It's just like this shit sucks ass, and I think that's a lot of it. Is just all this shit tastes like garbage. All this shit is just a marketing ploy. I just like, oh well, it's hard seltzer, even the hard seltzer, which I just drank, or like the hard sodas. Like, so you don't even want to like. Why don't you just buy vodka? That's what it's for.
This is, you know what my feeling is? My feeling is like the booze version of a handbill that I saw pasted to like a wall in London that said, coding is shit, graphic design is shit, all I want is revenge. That's how I feel about almost all alcohol now, is craft beer is shit. Production beer is shit.
Is genuinely shit.
All I want is revenge. Dog shit. Horrible time to consume alcohol. So what have we learned from all of this? From this 3 hour 47 minutes.
Make the beer your fucking self.
Yeah,
you'll be okay. You'll suck for a while. It'll probably be undrinkable garbage, and then you'll get better.
I thought we
make
could
Schraderbrow, make Keelia, make the fucking My Summer Car ass Finnish deer piss liquor.
Maybe we could all think about the future of beer here at 10 Forward, where we're exploring the galaxy and drinking some beer. And Whoopi Goldberg is serving us some beer, and then she's going to have some really bad political opinions later.
Yes.
Oh boy. I do respect Whoopi Goldberg's one thing when they asked her if she ever wanted to get married, and she said, I don't want anyone else in my house.
Yep.
I respect the hell out of that.
That sounds great. I like that.
Okay. I'll just go fuck myself.
Imagine the future, and you can replicate anything, and what you choose to do is that gray carpet.
Liam in the replicator, as opposed to having him in the house.
I love you, bud.
I was talking about the carpet in the 10 Forward, but like go off. Yeah, I was. Look at that beautiful bar. Look at that beautiful
Alex.
Future bar.
Eventually, everything is Liam.
Bazinga.
Okay. All right, are we done? Please, God, let us be done.
No.
Please.
What is the future of beer?
The future of beer is us ending this goddamn podcast.
No, the future of beer is probably what that one brewer for that article you never published said, which was that the big boys and the small boys will continue on, because there's always going to be a market for Budweiser. There's always going to be a market for these hyper local craft beers that don't really produce all that much and maybe package in crowlers. But where you have to be worried is regional breweries and smaller than that stuff like Yards, Victory, all those like not huge, but that's what you have to worry about. Oh yeah, it's like whatever, 2 a.m. your time.
Yeah, my answer to this is the future of beer is haram, because creeping Sharia will like conquer the West. Rome and the lands of the West will be made to submit to Dar al-Islam, and nobody's gonna drink alcohol anymore because it's haram. It's haram.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
It's unfortunate.
Did this whole podcast for nothing.
We'll have to do it,
Yeah,
well, this will be a historical record.
That's right.
Unless they destroy it.
In like 500 years' time, somebody's going to be like, see, there were Muslims who drink. And I was like, yeah, because I'm a piece of shit, and I'm a dumb piece of shit, and I drink beer.
No, the Uzbek Muslims are going to overrun everyone.
That's right. we got to try to get that like Central Asian Islam, where they're like, man, Islam, isn't it great? Let's celebrate with a drink.
Listen. We're all gonna when Sharia overruns the world, we will all celebrate with a drink.
That's exactly right. Oh my god. Well, Allahu Akbar, everyone.
Allahu Akbar.
Bye. It's over. We're done. Yes. We made it. We made it.